across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's 2 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, we have got 4 glorious hours of all the news that's breaking, all the views that you won't hear anywhere else either, and of course your thoughts too. You can send us a voice note. 0344 499 1000 is the number to send that to via WhatsApp. You can text us at 87222. You can tweet us at talkTV. We've got a lot to talk about this morning. There's breaking news overnight from the United States of America. A plane appears to have had a mid-air collision with a Black Hawk helicopter. There's apparently 64 people on board the plane. The thought is that there could be as many as 64 people who have thought to be killed in that particular incident. Here's how Fox News reported it just moments ago.
As you just mentioned, Jim, a source does confirm to me that there was a tragic mid-air collision around 9 p.m. that happened over the Potomac River involving an American airline commercial flight 5342 from Wichita, Kansas, trying to land here at DCA that crashed with the Black Hawk helicopter. As you just mentioned, Jim, now we have clarification whether it was military, government, or law enforcement. You just said the AP put out an alert saying that it was Army. And a source does tell me there are expected to be around 60 individuals currently unaccounted for, and authorities fear that there may not be too many survivors.
And it's a bad news morning, but obviously we'll bring you updates on that as they come through from Washington, D.C., the home, of course, of the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, who has already called it a terrible accident. We'll find out what could possibly have happened. How could a passenger plane coming into land at one of the biggest airports in the east coast of America, Washington National, have suddenly collided with an Army helicopter, which appears to have been the case. It's a Black Hawk helicopter. We'll bring you details on it, as we say, as we go forward. Meanwhile, on the rest of the stories this morning, we've got an awful lot around airports, strangely enough. Heathrow very much front and centre of the headlines this morning. Heathrow will not be ready until 2050, says the Daily Telegraph. This is after all of the hullabaloo yesterday around Rachel Reeves' growth plan, in which she announced, amongst other things, a railway line built between Oxford and Cambridge, which she calls the new Silicon Valley, and also, of course, the expansion of Heathrow Airport, a third runway. But Daily Mail remains unconvinced. Chancellor's Heathrow plan flies straight into turbulence. This is because Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, and many top Labour MPs and donors actually say they will vow opposition. Net Zero Miliband has gone completely missing. Nobody knows why. He's not saying anything about it at all. And Ryanair's boss has said this thing won't even be built for 25 years if there is any point to it. And he's given a very damning press conference to talk about how useless this Labour government actually is. And as if you wanted any more information about the migrant gangs, the Telegraph's got a story that says there's a £3,000 a day cost now of giving every Channel migrant new clothes when they arrive because, you know, maybe they're a bit wet from crossing the Channel. Absolutely unbelievable. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. A very good morning to you. Bad news breaking this morning. There's a news conference actually underway at Reagan National Airport after the mid-air collision last night. It happened around about 9 p.m. US time, which is about 2 o'clock in the morning here. Let's go straight across to that press conference and listen in.
And there are folks there, councils there to work with the families. We did have aircraft that were in the air. They were diverted to Dulles Airport, some 19 aircraft. We had personnel, United, and others had personnel. We want to thank WMATA for extending their hours on the Metro to make sure that those folks were accommodated. Right now, as was said earlier by the chief, we're in a rescue mode. We will continue in that rescue mode. I want to thank all of the mutual aid responders, all the counties, the district, folks from Maryland and Virginia. Everybody's on site doing the best they can. And numerous boats out in the water right now. NTSB is on site. I want to thank all of the folks behind me, the Secretary, the Mayor, 2 senators for all of their support. And we're going to continue to work through the night. I do want to make an announcement. People are, concerned about what's going to happen in the morning. Reagan National Airport will be closed until 11 o'clock. That's when the first flights will take off. But we're going to continue to do our best and work through this situation over the course of the night, and we hope to have more news as it develops. But for right now, it's a very difficult situation out there with the cold. It's very dark, but there are numerous boats out there. There are dive teams out there. So, again, we'll continue to work this situation, and I'll turn it back to the Mayor. Thank you very much.
That's John Potter you're listening to there from the Airports Authority at Reagan National, talking about what is effectively a rescue operation, because unfortunately the mid-air collision happened close to Reagan National, which is right on the Potomac River, very big river. Sorry, Emma Wolfe is here this morning. I haven't introduced you, Emma. Good morning to you. A very, very solemn morning here, obviously, because a plane crash appears to have... And it sort of brings to mind the fact that we don't have many of these anymore. There was a time, I remember when I worked in America, where there seemed to be a plane crash happening every month, but this hasn't really happened for a while. But it looks as though it's a mid-air collision between a Black Hawk helicopter run by the Army and a flight from American Airlines, Wichita, Kansas, I think they said it was coming from, but it would appear that all of the people on the plane would have ended up in the river, and there's not much hope, I don't think, by the sounds of it, for any of them to be found alive.
64 people on board.
Yeah,
exactly. It's now in sort of rescue mode, isn't it? And obviously they're working through the night. It's what, maybe one in the morning there now.
Yeah.
So it looks like it'll be a pretty grim night, and then
very cold, because it is that time of year as well.
And I mean, it's been minus, you know, good degrees minus in Washington. We saw that with the inauguration a few weeks ago. Yeah. So it's going to be a pretty grim night for those people and for people waiting for news.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously very early to speculate in any way what could have happened, but a lot of people I've spoken to this morning saying it's kind of incredulous that this could have happened, given all of the machinery that's now on board, not only the passenger plane, but also the Black Hawk helicopter. You know, these are very sophisticated machines with very sophisticated equipment, and for there to have been a mid-air collision is almost unthinkable.
It's also a reminder, though, that, you know, these are planes, these are helicopters in the skies, and there is always a moment of, I don't know, human error, whatever it is, whatever it might turn out to be, that every time you kind of fly, you take your life in your hand, and it is still a crazy thing to do. Yeah. And as you say, mercifully, these are very, very rare these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, strangely enough, airports very much in the firmament of the front pages this morning, because of course yesterday Rachel Reeves got up and made a speech about this growth plan of hers, which seems to centre around a third runway at Heathrow, which many people, I mean, I was sort of joking about it the other day, saying, can you imagine how long it's going to take to build? It'll probably be 7 years, probably 8 years. I mean, they're talking 25 years in the paper today.
A lot longer than 7 years. I hate to move from sort of tragedy to comedy, but I'm sorry, yesterday's announcement, a growth plan about, and then her sort of keynote, you know, her rabbit out of the hat here was her support for a third runway at Heathrow.
As if that's going to fix everything.
Pretty pathetic when we urgently need growth, when she's basically making employers, you know, unable to employ people, when we have Lloyds Bank, when we have Sainsbury's, when we have our biggest businesses, as well as all the other small businesses that are folding, when we have them closing branches, sacking their staff, all of that, and she comes up with a third runway at Heathrow, which, as you say, probably won't be, if ever. If ever. Do you think this is actually going to happen?
They've been
how many times has this...
They've been talking about it for 22 years.
Exactly.
All right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, you know, literally my children have grown up in the time that they've had a conversation.
I think most people assume there are about 7 runways at Heathrow, actually. When you talk to young people, they think there are lots of runways. The fact that we've only got 2 is pretty dire. But no, this is absolutely ridiculous. There's going to be endless climate protests. There'll be endless engineering work. I mean, we do not have a good record on big infrastructure projects.
I was
We're going to have to put a bridge or something, or a tunnel under the M25.
My producer just before the show. So can you imagine the carnage at Heathrow if they actually ever do sort of put spades into the ground and start digging around and decide to actually create something? Because the M25 apparently will have to go underground.
It'll have to go underground
that'll take forever. So there'll be cones everywhere. You won't be able to drive anywhere. There won't be any car parks anywhere. You'll be stuck in, you know, a temporary traffic light hell. It'll be absolutely madness.
So for listeners not currently in London, and I congratulate you if you're not currently in London, London is basically a roadworks hell at the moment. I don't know what's happened in the past few months. Every single road. And I go through the city.
Them off, don't they?
They just close them off. They don't really do much, but they put cones up, divert traffic. It is a nightmare. The idea of that on top of the kind of airport hell that already is
it's
kind
already
of nightmarish. You imagine that, building a third runway at Heathrow. This will not happen in Reeves's chancellorship. It won't happen in Starmer's political lifetime. It probably won't happen in the lifetime of many people. Plus, the first thing that happened was the London mayor, and Heathrow is in London. The London mayor came out and said he doesn't support it. In fact, he opposes it.
Yeah, and he's going to fight every step of the way to stop it from happening.
And he's the mayor of London.
Right.
So this is a brilliant part of her growth plan.
The other great part of the growth plan is a railway line between Oxford and Cambridge, which apparently she's going to call the new Silicon Valley.
The new Silicon Valley.
You're kind of going, sorry? What are you talking about? My favourite story, one of my favourite stories this morning about the growth sector is that yet another Starmer shambles on page 2 of the Daily Mail. Lloyd's announced plans to axe 136 branches just a day after its boss met Keir Starmer at a city summit on reviving the economy.
So he got lots of confidence from that meeting.
So inspired by that meeting, he said, right, we'll just shut 136 banks down. I mean, we're
laughing, but it's actually really, really dire. And the fact that her big growth plan, this is all she could come up with.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, we know politicians need to think long-term. They do. There need to be long-term projects, of course.
And we have said this for many a year. But, I mean, surely to God, they should have said something about this if they were planning. And again, we go back to what they said before the election.
Wow.
You know, we've got everything costed. We're ready to hit the ground running. Every department is prepared. We've done lots and lots of preparatory work. We know what we're going to do. We've got a plan. Well, they never mentioned the expansion of Heathrow. And, in fact, if you go back to 2020, which we've done, you can find Keir Starmer saying this. Keir Starmer
I was very
Heathrow.
pleased in that Heathrow judgment in our courts the other day. Firstly, they came to the decision that they did on Heathrow, but secondly, it's the first court decision in the world that's taken the Paris Agreement seriously and said that they were the determining issue in that. There has to be a lot more of that. So local action, national action, but we've got to play on the international stage here as well.
So he's actually supporting local action against the third runway and international action against the third runway. Suddenly now it's the answer to all of his problems.
Is that 2020?
Yeah.
Doesn't he look better then?
He does.
I mean, he looks like a younger, happier
about 20
man.
years younger.
He looks as though he has aged. Well, not in the past 4 years, but in the past 6 months, that man has gone from being... You know,
haven't we all?
Well, we all?
I feel like I've aged about 10 years.
I know. Well, every day of January as well. No, but I mean, for goodness sake, it's going to be bound up in legal challenges and people gluing themselves to the M25 and, as you say, tunnels, bridges, goodness knows what. If this is the plan for growth, then, I mean, I think it just shows quite how desperate Rachel Reeves is to find something to make this announcement.
Because the question of growth is all very well, and it's good that they want to grow the economy, but they don't seem to have a clue how to do it, because just by building or by threatening to build a third runway at Heathrow, how is that going to produce any growth at all?
Diddly squat. And when you are literally bringing in policies day after day which prohibit growth, which are preventing growth, which, I mean, growth, it comes from lots of small businesses doing business, people buying things.
It doesn't come from the government spending money.
No, it doesn't.
It's public money, which is actually borrowed money.
Or handing out money. It doesn't come from that either.
No.
It doesn't come from millions of people coming into our country and needing more public services. It doesn't come from that either.
No.
I mean, there are lots of things it doesn't come from.
Ed Miliband, who also is opposed to a third runway, has gone very quiet. One of the things that I found amusing this week was that Rachel Reeves on Sunday was talking about the need for a third runway, and she more or less gave it away on Laura Kunzberg's show that was what was going to happen. But she was convincing herself that actually it would be cleaner for Britain and cleaner for the City of London because planes won't fly round and round and round like they do now. Well, I don't know about you, but planes don't fly round and round and round anymore. They basically fly in very, very large circles around the island of Britain. They don't just circle around over, you know, the Shard, you know, waiting to land at Heathrow. And then she said, oh, we're going to be giving them all this biofuel as well, so they'll be really, really green. So the air quality will be really good. And when she was asked then, well, why are you then shutting down Grangemouth, which is the only plant in Britain that could actually produce this biofuel, she had no answer. She literally froze.
But she doesn't know the difference between debt and deficit.
No.
I mean, this is a woman who I think is economically illiterate. And also, Mike, on the green thing, isn't it interesting when we want to fly, we're told we're literally beaten around the head by the net zero crazies and Ed Miliband.
And we're made to pay a flight tax.
Flight tax, can't do this, can't do that, can't put petrol in your car, can't even have a car, can't do this. But when she wants to, when she's desperate, needs to find something, suddenly this third runway is going to be incredibly green. And it's all going to be run on biofuel. And it won't produce any carbon emissions, even though flying is meant to be the #1 evil thing that we all do.
Yeah. Well, I've mentioned before on this show that when you drive out to Heathrow, you hit a speed zone on the M4. It's supposed to be 70 miles an hour, goes down to 60 miles an hour. Why? Because it's a clean air zone. And if you wind the window down, you can literally smell the aviation fuel.
Yeah.
I said this the other day. It's the most ludicrous thing in the world.
It is.
You know? Unbelievable. Anyway, we'll come back to it. We'll keep you updated, of course, on what's happening over in Washington, D.C. But we're going to talk about migrants coming up next, because this will really drive you mad if you've been waiting for something to get you going this morning. £3,000 a day is the cost of giving every Channel migrant that arrives here on these shores from the small boats new clothing. I wonder if it's designer clothing. I hope it is, because you wouldn't want to give them anything knockoff or cheap or, you know, from Primark. You know, I hope they go to the top of the range shops to get them some nice clothing. Because obviously, you know, when you're robbing a shop, you want to be dressed well for it. Just kidding. This is Talk.
When we win the next general election,
when you say,
not just well, look, if you look at where we're headed in the polls, Julia, we've got an enormous amount to do. Clearly, we have an enormous amount to do, but we can see the trend and direction in this country is the British people are waking up. They're waking up and appreciating the optimistic message that Nigel and our MPs are offering them, and that's why we've gone from 14% support in the general election just 7 months ago to an average of the polls at 25%. So yes, we have an enormous amount to do. We don't take anything for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 21 minutes past 6. I got this from Dan in Lingfield. He says, hi, Mike. If we have the money for Heathrow, then why don't they finish HS2? It's a very good point. Perhaps the bats won't allow it. They obviously are going to cost an awful lot of money to get them out of that bat tunnel that they've got there. And Graham says from Bushy, the only thing growing under Reeves is the length of her Pinocchio nose. Let's get a voice note from Phil.
Morning, Mike. Phil from Nottingham. Up early to keep Rachel Reeves in the lifestyle she's become accustomed to. Now, in terms of airports, runways, the only departures I want to see really are Reeves, Dharma, illegal migrants and foreign criminals. That'll do for starters. And in terms of all this expansion and, you know, the Silicon Valley nonsense, they've forgot the North, haven't they? They've forgot the working class. We have been abandoned.
They have, and in fact the Scots are not very happy either, because they're saying that they've been left behind in this massive growth expansion scenario. Great cartoon. We don't normally mention the cartoons on the front pages today. Emma Wolf's here with me. Matt's cartoon, you've got a picture of Stonehenge, and people saying, two people looking at it going, we now think it was where people came to argue about third runway at Heathrow. Because it does feel as though it's been going on for that long.
It has been going on for that long, and it will go on and on and on. As we've said, this idea, this pie in the sky about building the third runway is already, I love the Daily Mail headline, Chancellor's Heathrow plan flies straight into turbulence. And it's absolutely true. Already, as we've said, already the London Mayor, you know, the Prime Minister himself has a bit of a shaky record. There's always a tweet. Well, there's always a tweet.
I mean, I think I'm right in saying, because we did a bit of this yesterday, there's at least 5 or 6 current cabinet ministers who have been on record saying we should never expand Heathrow and should never build a third runway.
Heathrow's one of those things where you will find them saying the exact opposite of what they're now saying. And as you say, the what's he called, the net zero energy secretary idiot, Miliband, has gone very, very quiet, missing in action.
Nobody knows where he is. We've got a quote, I think, a clip from Rachel Reeves talking about Heathrow. Let's have a look at that.
According to the most recent study from Frontier Economics, a third runway could increase potential GDP by 0.43% by 2050. I have always been clear that a third runway at Heathrow would unlock further growth, boost investment, increase exports, and make the UK more open and more connected. So I can confirm today that this government supports a third runway at Heathrow and is inviting proposals to be brought forward by the summer.
So she actually hasn't got a plan at all, right?
No.
And did I hear that correctly, that it could produce as much as, according to a poll, and a piece of projection that isn't actually a fact, 0.43%?
Yeah. And she
Sorry. I mean, if they were offering me that in my bank as an interest rate, I'd tell them to go and shove it.
Right.
0.43%.
I know. It's so underwhelming,
0.5%.
It's actually funny.
Right. So, and it's not even... So she's not even saying, look, we're going to build a third runway, here's who's going to do it. She's asking people if they can call in and go, yeah, I can help you out there, darling. You know, Del Boy. Go, yeah, all right, listen, I've got a plan. I've got this tractor down the road, right? I'll bring it up. We'll dig up that, you know, that bit over there near the third runway. We'll build it there, and that'll be great. What the hell is she talking about?
Literally, what is she talking about? She wants proposals by the summer. Sort of bit vague, wishy-washy. Everyone could come forward.
June, July.
Anyone got any ideas?
August.
Can I put,
We'll be away for a month, obviously, so there's no growth then.
And can anyone put in a business plan?
Yeah,
she really is not clear.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think
I fancy the concession for the cigarette shop. You know,
I'd like that.
Third runway. Can I have the duty-free?
It's
trouve le duty-free, we used to say when we went on holiday. I mean,
it's not oven ready or shovel ready or anything. No. It's literally just an idea.
It's not even been created. Never mind oven ready. There's nothing to put in the oven. And there's no oven either. No. I mean, it's just madness.
And why is it that when they have their growth plan, they have to stand in an abandoned factory like that? There's a Siemens
some whirring
factory
sound going on in the background.
With a whirring sound. Because that means growth. That means kickstarting the economy. You go out to Oxfordshire and you stand in a factory completely empty. They hardly allow
They'll probably shut the factory down next week because they won't want to pay the extra national insurance
Siemens will probably come out tomorrow and say that they're closing all their axing all their factories.
This is worse than I thought.
It's really dire.
Zero, you know, so this is now the
0.43%.
The edge of our absolute universe, where we are forging ahead in the white-hot technological revolution of the new century. 0.43% growth.
And I wonder how much, anyway, we spend in all sorts of other nonsense. I think it's somewhere in the papers. Sadiq Khan has been spending millions on woke art.
Yes.
Well, I bet you that will be outweighed by, you know, the Heathrow 0.43%.
And the NHS has been spending ever more money on diversity jobs.
Of course it has.
Because, you know...
it's terribly misogynistic, the NHS.
Is. Absolutely right. Which brings us to the front page of the Daily Telegraph. £3,000 a day, you'll be pleased to know, is the cost of giving migrants new clothes when they arrive. Men, women and children arriving at Dover have been handed free clothes including puffer coats, hats and gloves in winter, flip-flops in the summer, at a cost of almost £4 million over the past 3 years. Nice work if you can get it, isn't it? Not only do you come to Britain and get set up with a new life in a new nice hotel or possibly a house if you've got your family with you, you get a new outfit, you get a mobile phone, you get some cash to spend just in case you feel like buying a couple of packs of cigarettes, and you get free food.
Free healthcare, free dental care, free travel. I think they get travel passes.
Apparently,
some of them, as you say, some of them are getting new mobile phones.
According to the Home Office, right, they have to sometimes replace migrants' clothing because they're often sprayed or soaked through with seawater. Right. Well, that would be because they've come on a dinghy illegally to this country. In America, they say, if you've entered the country illegally, you're a criminal and we're going to deport you. Here, we give them a new suit.
Here, we give them puffer coats. Puffer coats. In America, under Donald Trump, they will be put in an orange jumpsuit.
Sent to Guantanamo Bay.
And sent to Guantanamo Bay.
Start sending them,
Here, we're giving them... Apparently, there are changing rooms. We're changing them.
Apparently, they're occasionally splashed with fuel, posing a health and safety risk.
Wonder how that happens.
What about the health and safety risk when they run around stabbing people? There's a bit of a health and safety risk as well.
This is literally... it's a silly story, but this is another incentive. This idea that you're welcoming people in, you're giving them free clothes. When they've arrived illegally, you're giving them free clothes. You're then putting them up in comfort while they wait for their asylum application to be confirmed.
I know.
To be approved, because 66% are being approved.
Yeah.
This is really, really showing Britain as a soft touch.
Yeah. I mean, there's also going to be a bill introduced into Parliament later on today, which is going to be somehow affecting the counter-insurgency against the terror gangs. But I mean, if we're giving them free clothes, how seriously is anyone going to take any new law that might come in, which is going to affect what they do?
Exactly. I mean, it all contributes to this impression that you'll come here and you'll be welcomed. And frankly, they've travelled through many, many, many safe countries already to get here.
They might have had to change their pants a couple of times as well. So, obviously we'll have to give them some new underwear just in case they're feeling a bit sort of dirty.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a joke, isn't it?
It is. It is when British people are really, really struggling.
Absolutely unbelievable. A couple of other stories to talk about. Shall we say the Lord Mandelson as a name from the past? He said he was wrong to call Donald Trump a danger to the world. It's funny that, isn't it? Because now that he's almost getting the job of ambassador to the United States of America, which seems more and more likely by the looks of things now, he said yesterday, I haven't seen any specific information that would prevent me from getting the job. So nobody's really saying officially in the White House we don't want to give him the job. So we expect him to be made ambassador any day now, right?
Funny how quickly he's eating his words, isn't it? Yeah, and he's
so that's all right then. So I mean, now in modern day politics, you can basically say anything you want because a couple of years later, you just say, "Well, I didn't really mean that."
Exactly.
When I said I didn't think there should ever be a runway at Heathrow, didn't mean it. When I said that we would not put council tax up, not a penny more will you pay under Labour, I didn't really mean that.
I mean, is it any wonder that no one has any trust in politicians anymore?
I know.
There's a big Brexit anniversary tomorrow, and 50% upwards of 50% of voters saying, of pollers, people polled saying they just don't trust the government on anything anymore.
Right.
Let alone they feel
that's a big story in the Express, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they feel betrayed over Brexit. They feel that I think 9% of people polled said that they trusted the government to even kind of hold to the Brexit line, let alone carry out any of the benefits.
And those people probably work for the government.
Exactly.
They're probably the only people they could find that actually have any kind of faith in them whatsoever. It's coming up to 6:30. We'll bring you the latest news from Washington, D.C. You're looking at a live picture there of the Potomac River, which is the big river that runs right around Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. It's right next to Reagan National as well. There have been in the past quite a few plane crashes there, and it always ends up where the plane, at some point or other, or part of a plane in any crash there, ends up in the river. And they're calling it a rescue operation. There could be 64 people, I think, who have been... I think they've recovered some bodies already, but I don't think they're hopeful that they will find anybody alive because it's incredibly cold and it's incredibly dark as well in the middle of the night, and they're searching the river for survivors, but it doesn't look good. It's a shocking story. We'll bring it to you with more detail as soon as we can, but it would appear, what we know so far, is a Black Hawk helicopter operated by the Army appears to have collided with an air passenger plane coming in from Wichita, Kansas, at American Airlines. Airlines plane, 64 people on board, and obviously a terrible, terrible tragedy to happen very, very early in the morning over there. It's currently something like 1:31 in Washington, D.C. We'll be back with more, including the news that 2.4 million people are now in receipt of sickness benefits without any need for them to look for work. Marvellous, isn't it? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Till.
Welcome back to Morning Glory 6:34. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Andrew says this, has she done the maths? She's raving that it will add 0.43% of GDP, which is just 4.3 billion by 2050. What a joke. It's like when she got so excited about knocking off 1 penny off a pint. Absolutely clueless. Well, you do worry, don't you, that Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, as she's become known, or Rachel Rubbish,
Rachel Rubbish,
she's now called by the leader, by the head of Ryanair, which we might get to in a minute. She doesn't appear to have a clue about economics. She just doesn't seem to know hard sums, does she?
Well, she doesn't, you know, as I said, she doesn't know the difference between debt and deficit, national debt and national deficit. She's really, really clueless. And also, I mean, so many of the policies that we've seen since Labour came in that dark day in July, we've seen so many of the policies that just don't make sense, that will end up costing more. The private schools thing, the pensioners who are just basically... All of the tax grabs.
They're making no money at all.
The savings that are no savings, the savings that are nibbling at the edges and making people's lives absolutely miserable. Pensioners, this winter, freezing to death in their homes, ending up in hospital, and look at the hospitals. Oh, now we've got people dying in corridors. Well, yeah, that's because you've made people really sick and frozen at home. We know that, you know, excess deaths in winter are often from older people who are very, very cold.
Very cold and very
savings
vulnerable.
are not savings at all.
No,
there are
really
other ways of making those savings. The private schools thing. I know, let's get rid of all the private schools. People have to transfer into state schools. Oh, guess what? We don't have enough space in state schools. What are we going to do? I know, let's bus them to the next town. The whole thing. The whole thing. And meanwhile, there is money for migrants coming into our country.
Yeah, if you fancy a new puffer jacket. Let's get a voice note from James.
Good morning, Mike. Now, if I was the Chancellor, I'd stop all foreign aid for the foreseeable future. I'm old school. I believe in charity starts at home. The British people should be looked after. We pay a stupid amount of tax now. And what? The roads are shit. You can't get a doctor's appointment. It's absolute disgrace how much tax we pay now. Here, Mike, hide your money because I think they're going to come for you next, mate. Cheers, mate. Have a great one.
I think they will. I've got a new policy. I'm going to spend all my money rather than actually let them take it off me in tax. And that's what I was trying to do the other day anyway, so quite successfully. James, thank you very much indeed for that. Loads of people are so fed up with this government. But, you know, one good thing, apparently, is that we're going to be at front and centre of the new technological revolution. Because according to the Sun newspaper, page 2, it's the end of no signal for calls, right? The UK beats Musk in phone space race. Apparently, Vodafone, British telecom firm, has beaten tech billionaire Elon Musk in the mobile space race. The breakthrough will make the UK the first to connect calls to standard handsets via satellite. Now, this is a great move, right? Because I was saying just the other day, you can't go to certain parts of this country and actually get a phone signal of any kind. I haven't been to Dorset recently, but whenever I used to go there, which was quite a lot at one particular time, I used to go to Corfe Castle quite a bit. Yeah. And you used to have, I don't know if you know Corfe Castle, you used to have to walk to the top of the high street where it's slightly elevated and where there's a very nice warmer or a very lovely bakery, and you had to hold the phone up in the air like that to get an email. Yeah. Right? So literally to get an email or to get any kind of signal. You couldn't talk to anyone because if you were standing with the phone here, there was no signal at all. And even now, around parts of South London, which is meant to be the capital and one of the biggest cities in the world, the phone will suddenly go dead when you go past certain parts of, you know, the areas that I drive through on a regular basis. There's no rhyme or reason for it. It's hopeless. This is the worst phone signal area in the world that I've ever been to. I went to Cyprus on holiday. Phone signal was brilliant. You know, Wi-Fi was great. You know, 4G, 5G, whatever you like. Everywhere in America works really well. Montenegro, brilliant. I mean, everywhere I've been, they've got better signal than here.
I know, and I wonder really how we're going to beat Elon Musk in the phone space race. The idea, given that, as you say, these black spots all over the country, how on earth we're going to rig up all these satellites out in space and get amazing coverage?
I know.
Just kind of
never mind the 21st century. Front page of the Sun, by the way, a bit different this morning to everybody else. They've got an exclusive on chaos at a celebrity hotel in Oxfordshire, where apparently Manchester United's legends were having a party. Nicky Butt's 50th birthday party, apparently. There's a police investigation going on after alleged headbutt left a security guard with a suspected broken nose. And amongst the people who were at this party, Gary Neville, David Beckham and Paul Scholes.
Yes, indeed.
We're not suggesting any of them were responsible for the headbutt.
No, but it was Nicky Butt's. It was Nicky Butt's party, which makes
I'm amazed they haven't got Butts
headline.
in the headline. Yeah.
I think they were. Yeah, I think they were in one of the lovely Soho farmhouse ones. So yeah, it sounds like a great party. But no, maybe not. Not so much with the headbutting.
No, exactly right. Let's talk a little bit about the other story on the front page of the Times today, which is 2.4 million people receiving sickness benefits without any need to seek work. Now, we know that there's all these people who are sort of economically inactive, and there's 9.4 million of them or something like that, or 9.5 million. But basically, over the past 5 years, the proportion of applicants approved for the most valuable claims of benefits has surged to 50%. Contributing to a welfare overspend of 8.6 billion. I mean, you talk about they've got money for some stuff. Yeah, exactly. They've got money for this, haven't they?
And what's really worrying about this is these are the people on the highest benefits. These are the ones getting thousands and thousands of pounds a year. And it almost, because they're claiming the highest level of disability benefit, they're not actually allowed to work. They're not allowed to do what I think universal credit was originally set up to do, which was allow people to work a bit and sort of titrate or sort of, you know, have a bit of benefits as well. Yeah. So this is even more damaging. You're literally putting people on the highest level of benefit, paying them the most.
But the numbers keep going up as well, so there's obviously no attempt at trying to get those who are already on these benefits somehow back to work in some way, shape or form. Yeah. There's no effort at all for that.
Well, and also I think it's because the categories keep expanding. I mean, when anyone can claim mental health, or not anyone, that's not fair, but people can claim mental health.
Well, lots of people do.
Lots of people do, and you know the category seems to be sort of everything from anxiety and depression to just sort of general despair and, you know, malaise at the world. That's called life.
Yeah, well, I've spoken to doctors on this show on a regular basis who say, oh yeah, well, when we get asked to sign off somebody off sick for work, we don't really see them anymore. We just send them an email and give them permission to be off work. And so there's no checks and balances. If you ring up a GP and say, I don't feel great, I'd like to have a week off, they'll just sign you off.
And many doctors who are, you know, responsible say, well, if I don't sign it, someone else will. Right. And there are many that we know, there are people out there on TikTok and all sorts showing people how to answer the questions correctly to show that they're in the highest category, they're pretty suicidal, and that they've got the highest benefits. And that does such a disservice, not only to the country and to the people that are working, but it does a disservice to people that genuinely need benefits and genuinely need some kind of medical help.
But, I mean, they keep saying, don't they? Liz Kendall has said, the Work and Pension Secretary, radical reform. She wants to get a grip on the benefits bill. She confirmed the annual cap imposed by the Tories at 134.7 billion this year has again been breached. So 134 billion.
But, Mike, it's a bit like Wes Streeting. He says all this stuff about the NHS and reform. I've read it 1,000 times since they came in.
But nothing happens.
Same with Rachel Reeves, saying all this stuff about growth. People are not idiots. We can see the difference between actual policies, actual action, and just rhetoric or nonsense.
Yeah, nonsense. Or lies. Some
or
people
BS.
would call them,
Because people aren't idiots. They can see that they're saying this stuff and they're not doing anything about it. Same with Starmer on smashing the gangs.
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah.
Which gang have you
still seem
smashed?
to be going well.
He still found that bloke months ago, that Turkish bloke.
Oh, yeah,
or what
the Kurd.
he?
Yeah,
Kurd.
he was Kurdish, wasn't he?
What happened to him?
Yeah, he's probably been sent for
Given
trial
a new
somewhere.
jacket.
Yeah, he's got a new jacket, some new shoes.
flip-flops, new phone.
He had some fuel on his trousers, so he got a new pair of Levi's. Very good, marvellous. How about this one? Attacks against retail staff and shop thefts have hit record levels. More than 2,000 violent and abusive incidents occurred each day in 2023 and 2024, according to a new survey. Unbelievable. 55,000 thefts a day.
Yes, because people are acting with impunity. Because there is, I mean, it must be a grim time, and that's what this article's saying, to work in retail.
Oh, awful.
I mean, I don't know about the abuse. I mean, I think people are a bit kind of, hurty
Well, I was
words.
saying this the other
but
day.
No, shoplifting and attacks.
I'm one of those old-fashioned shoppers. You know, I tend to go and pay for what I've actually taken off the shelves, and they look at me as if, what are you doing? I'm paying for it. Oh, really? Well, nobody else is.
Oh, you're actually paying for it?
It feels like that.
I know.
It actually feels like I'm the only one paying for anything.
But when the police just have stopped attending any kind of shoplifting incidents, even the ones where they go in with their trolley, clear out the beer fridges, clear out, I don't know, the cigarette thing, clear out all the high-value stuff, and then walk out the shop. When the police have even stopped attending those, yes, shoplifters just think, I'll do what I want. I'll take what I want. They're shoplifting to order.
Yeah. I know. It's incredible. What's going on with this country? I know that's a question we ask quite regularly.
But the police are pursuing Facebook people instead.
Well,
they're pursuing,
did you see that footage of them pursuing a woman on a mobility scooter?
Yes.
We played that the other day, and that was actually a shoplifting incident. Amazingly, they turned up for that.
Yes.
But they couldn't actually be bothered getting out of the car to walk faster than she was driving, which they could have done, and stop her. Instead, they kept driving the car up to where she was, and then she kept going around them. Here it is. I mean, it was up in Sheffield, and this old woman on a mobility scooter. It's hilarious. I don't know if you've seen it. And they've got the blue lights on, right? They've got the sirens on. She's doing about 7 miles an hour.
Absolutely brilliant. Give her a medal.
She makes it onto Plank of the Week. I can exclusively reveal. Actually, it's the police that make it onto Plank of the Week. But every time they try and stop her, she just goes round them.
Why do they not get out of the car and run after her and stop her?
Yeah. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Anyway, more from myself and Emma Wolf coming up very shortly. We'll keep you updated on that terrible situation in Washington, D.C. And, of course, I think we've got a new voice note from Dave.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Emma. It's Dave travelling into London. About the migrants and the clothing, maybe we could get Lord Ali to donate some suits to them. That'd be a good move, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Lord Ali, some suits, please, for the migrants. Or maybe some spectacles. How's your eyesight? You want a free eye test? Have some free glasses from Lord Ali. Welcome to Britain. Unbelievable. 6:45.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear, will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this Parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:48. The breaking news this morning is that an American Airlines passenger jet with 60 passengers on board has collided with a Black Hawk helicopter while landing at Reagan, Washington's National Airport near Washington, D.C. around 9 p.m. Local time. That's about 2 a.m. this morning. At least 18 bodies have so far been recovered following the crash from the river, the Potomac River, which is where the plane has ended up. And it doesn't look as if there's going to be anything other than a rescue operation going on. We'll be tuning in to any press conferences and any further details that we get. We'll obviously bring you as soon as we can, but it's obviously a terrible tragedy. An American Airlines passenger jet with 60 passengers on board collided as it was coming into land. We believe it was coming in from Wichita, Kansas. An American Airlines flight with 60 passengers on board crashed basically over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., where it's very, very cold, of course, as well. Why doesn't Rachel Reeves try to build a runway in Bosworth? Says Alan from Merseyside. And Simon in Spain says, Mike, the clothes for the migrants is the tip of the iceberg. Imagine what it costs to have the clothes cleaned, folded and delivered back, etc. I mean, this is the thing. It's just incredible, isn't it, what is being given away? And one here from Dean, who says, why can't the granted asylum applications be reduced from 66% to 0.43%? Great show. 0.43, of course, the magic number which Rachel Reeves says we're going to get as far as growth is concerned out of the building of Heathrow Airport, which the papers this morning are saying won't be finished until 2050.
If it ever happens.
So good luck looking for the third runway.
Exactly. And you know, the first message there makes a really good point. I was at one of these wretched centre parks a few years ago.
Oh, God.
And they have these things, rather than using a towel in the swimming changing room, you stand inside this thing and you put in 20p and it dries you off.
Right.
It's really quite annoying. But anyway, it heats up and it dries you off. Why don't they just put the migrants, walk them through that if they've got wet in the sea?
In fact, it's a good idea.
Covered in salt water.
They've got those at Thorpe Park.
Yeah, exactly.
My kids, when I took
those
my
little things,
take my kids there, and you go through the water slide or whatever it is, and they all just go and stand in this sort of hot air chamber, and they come out and they're all dry.
Well, why don't we do that rather than giving them new clothes? I suppose if they've got fuel on their clothes, they might just spontaneously combust. Well, they shouldn't be coming over on illegal dinghies then.
That'd be one way to sort the problem out. Let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. It's James from Blackburn. Rachel looked like she didn't believe a single word she was saying yesterday. She looked absolutely terrified. Her head was going all over the place. You could see she was desperately trying to keep on script. It was awful. She looked terrified, absolutely terrified. And then standard Shakir in PMQs, just as usual, isn't it? It's just, we won't be lectured by them. We're making the economy stronger. We're building up the foundations, fixing the foundations that this government left us. They're not the government anymore. You've been in power for long enough now. They're just terrible. Absolutely terrible.
James, brilliant. What a way to start the morning. I mean, we haven't even got any clips from Prime Minister's questions because it's crap. I just don't think we're going to bother playing any of them, I don't think. You know, all nodding behind the glass there. I'll tell you what we are going to play, though. Michael O'Leary, the boss of Ryanair, who's very unimpressed as well with Rachel Reeves and the Treasury altogether. Have a look at this.
I get a letter back this week from some dopey junior minister, James Murray, who's the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. He helpfully told me that actually the rate of APD increase is only going up by £2 for those flying short-haul economy. That is 1% of an average airfare. £2 is 1% of an average short-haul economy low fare. I don't know what airline this dopey git actually flies on that has economy airfares of £200. But the £2 is not 1% of an average airfare. But it probably shows you just how out of touch Her Majesty's Treasury are with reality.
Michael O'Leary there having a go at the Treasury because basically they're putting up passenger duty again as a tax, but he's basically saying that it's more like 15% because it's going to go up on an airfare which he says is on average in Ryanair 40 quid. So, you know, £2 increase on a tax is actually quite a lot. On something that I think was £12 will now become £14.
Yeah.
And out of £40, that's quite a big percentage. So he says this guy's a complete idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
But I think it's incredibly refreshing to have people who actually, whatever you think of Michael O'Leary.
I like Michael O'Leary. I think he's brilliant.
I think he's brilliant too. But it's nice when people actually know what they're talking about and also speak the truth.
Yeah. Well,
and,
he's an incredibly, like Elon Musk, an incredibly successful businessman.
Yes, he is.
You know, people might say, well, you know, he takes advantage of people. Well, nobody's, as he always says, nobody's forcing you to take a flight on Ryanair. But what you do when you take a flight on Ryanair is you know exactly what you're going to get.
You know what you're going to get,
right.
Exactly. And, you know, you know that it's going to be what what you've signed up to, whereas I think there's a real lack of trust. And the appalling performances of Rachel Reeves yesterday, Keir Starmer straight after that in PMQs, as you say. There's just no credibility left in this government.
They don't know what they're doing.
They carry on and on and on.
And they're busily trying to convince us that they do know what they're doing, and it's not working.
And they
I mean, look at this, right?
Words.
This is a typical example of what's wrong with Britain, right? A diplomat who lost classified documents detailing the locations of British special forces in Kabul is being lined up to be the UK's ambassador to NATO. What? He left some stuff at a bus stop, right? Some top-secret papers at a bus stop, I think somewhere in London, caused a transatlantic row after he took these bundles of papers home. They fell out of his bag.
And then they were found at a bus stop.
At a bus stop in Kent. And now he's going to be the ambassador to NATO. Marvellous. Great. What a good idea.
He's a diplomat. He's an idiot. This is classified information.
He's an idiot.
He is, of course he's an idiot, but I mean, this is absolute... I don't think I've ever dropped work papers, and I'm not a diplomat. I don't have high classified information. I don't think I've ever dropped work papers on the floor at the bus stop going home.
You know, here's the thing. If you're given some classified papers, you tend to keep them safe until you get to where you're going, don't you? You don't get home and go, oh, all those classified papers, where can I have left them?
They must have fallen out of the bag along with the carrots and the bread.
Right.
I mean, really. And now...
His name, by the way, is Angus Lapsley, which is not a bad name for somebody who's an idiot. Angus Lapsley. Unbelievable. He was promoted after this incident, by the way, to be Assistant Secretary-General for Defence Policy at NATO. Well done, Angus.
And someone who worked with this guy at the Ministry of Defence... It's not just us, Mike.
Right.
Someone who worked with this guy said there should be real concern about the decision-making behind this process. It cannot be overstated how significant this security breach was and the impact it had at the time. This is really, really serious.
I know.
Yeah, this is basically rewards for failure.
Yeah. Well, that's the civil service for you.
A bit like the Sue Gray.
Exactly right. How about this one from the Telegraph? Scots think their country was a victim of the British Empire. Guess why they think that? Because they've been given a load of cobblers and tosh and nonsense by the Scottish National Party, who have convinced them all that somehow Scotland was victimised by the horrible English, and now they're suffering under the yoke of victimhood. What we actually can tell you is that Scots were more than happy to be part of the East India Company, more than happy to be part of the British Empire that straddled the world. And in fact, the Scots were probably, I would say, represented in disproportionate terms. There was many more Scots involved in exploring the world and doing terrible things to the rest of the people in the world than the English were.
So can we now pay them billions in reparations? Is that going to be the next thing?
That might be the next thing. It's a YouGov survey found that...
Who's funding their NHS and their education system?
Well, you may well ask. A YouGov survey found that significantly more adults north of the border believe Scotland had been more of a subject in the empire than a partner, even though the facts are actually completely...
actually not true. That is actually not true,
the facts would not suggest. The facts are that actually Scotland was much more involved in Britain's global expansion than any other part of Britain.
That is,
You know?
I mean, that's really shocking, but I think it's part of this victim culture where you can just claim, you know, oppression.
Yes, and funnily enough, the people who think mostly like that are those who support independence for Scotland.
Yes, of course.
You know, because they've been
Funny
fed, drip-fed this complete and utter rubbish, which is actually counter to the truth.
Of course.
And they all believe it. Scots were involved in the slave trade, exploited slave labour in the plantations of the Caribbean. Glasgow's a case in point. Money's made from the transatlantic sugar and tobacco trades being invested in landed estates and industries that were the basis of Glasgow's region's remarkable economic success.
And I would bet
nothing to be ashamed of, by the way.
Yeah. Exactly.
But now they're pretending it didn't happen.
Let's have the truth. And I'm sure there are more sort of landed estates and lairds in Scotland, you know, subjecting the people to serfdom than there are in the rest of the UK.
Exactly right. Now let's talk back to the NHS. We mentioned it once before. We're nearly out of time, but the NHS is to go back to basics. Now, Wes Streeting is a man who started the race when he first got into government in July at sort of 100 miles an hour. So if you imagine he was, you know, like what's his name?
Lewis
Hamilton driving off the grid, and then suddenly by the time he's got to here, he's basically in the pits, and the car's not moving anywhere, and it's akin to that woman on the mobility scooter going round and round and round like that, because he's now basically rowing back on everything he said that he would do. Again, he said he was going to invest in the NHS, then he said he wasn't going to invest in it until there were reforms, then he invested in it anyway and gave all the money that he invested to the junior doctors as a pay rise. Now he's saying the NHS needs to have cut the number of health service targets by almost half.
He literally has rowed back and changed track on this so many times. All we've heard is we need to reform, we need to reform. You know, nice words, but actually very, very little substance. Last week, I think it was, we're not going to focus on targets anymore, we're going to focus on waiting lists. We're going to have different priorities. So what are the priorities now? Just A&E?
Right.
What about cancer? Is that an emergency? What about surgery? What about hip replacement? I mean, he is so incoherent now on the NHS. People have stopped listening. People just don't even believe that anything they say makes any sense.
You barely hear from him anymore. I mean,
exactly.
You know, before the election, he was barely off your screen. You couldn't shut him up about all the things he was going to do to change the NHS.
Yeah, but they'll tell you now, there's no money. Well, that's because you're paying a load of, you know, middle management and consultant, you know, management consultants, a load of billions. You're pouring more money into the NHS. It's not about more money. It's about people doing their job.
Exactly right. Anyway, we'll bring you more on that throughout the course of the morning. Thank you, Emma. Very kind to see you. Very good to see you. Emma Wolf there with the review of what's going on in the papers this morning. Obviously, we'll keep bringing you the latest news from Washington, D.C., where a plane has collided, a passenger plane has collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter. 60 or more people thought to have died in the accident. We'll bring you details coming up next on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. It's Thursday. We're getting close to the end of yet another week. We're getting close to the end of January, which is quite extraordinary, really. I don't know where the month has gone, but there's been an awful lot of news, an awful lot of water under the bridge, an awful lot of stories that we have covered in great detail here, and an awful lot of really, really interesting views that you've supplied to us. So please keep doing that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call us on. You can send us a voice note via WhatsApp on that same number. You can text us on 87222, and you can find us on Twitter as well, or X if you prefer, at talkTV. The breaking news this morning is that there has been a mid-air collision, I should say, over the skies of Washington, D.C. A plane crash, in fact, an American Airlines passenger jet with about 60 passengers on board has collided with a Black Hawk helicopter over the Potomac River while landing at Reagan National Airport, and it was coming in, we believe, from Wichita, Kansas. It happened around about 9 p.m. local time, around 2 a.m. our time. There is a rescue operation underway. There are divers in the water in the Potomac River, but it's very, very cold, as you might remember from the inauguration last year. The airport is closed until approximately 11 o'clock this morning, also local time. You're seeing there what appears to be footage of the air collision actually happening. It's impossible to understand how it could have happened. So far, 18 bodies have been recovered, but they're still looking for others. Let's get what the breaking news is from Fox TV.
As you just mentioned, Jim, a source does confirm to me that there was a tragic mid-air collision around 9 p.m. that happened over the Potomac River involving an American airline commercial flight 5342 from Wichita, Kansas, trying to land here at DCA that crashed with the Black Hawk helicopter. As you just mentioned, Jim, now we have clarification whether it was military, government, law enforcement. You just said the AP put out an alert saying that it was Army, and a source does tell me there are expected to be around 60 individuals currently unaccounted for, and authorities fear that there may not be too many survivors.
Yeah, we'll keep you updated on that as soon as we know any more. We'll bring it to you right here, of course, on Morning Glory. 5 minutes past 7. Ben Habib is here. We're going to talk to him about a great many things, including migrants back in the news this morning because a taxpayer is paying £3,000 a day, believe it or not, for new clothes and new shoes for Channel migrants, because apparently when they get off the dinghies, they're a bit wet because they've been splashed by water from the sea. I mean, it's hard to believe, isn't it? Meanwhile, of course, Rachel Reeves thinks the answer to everything is to build a third runway at Heathrow, but according to the papers this morning, it won't even be ready until 2050. So the idea that it's going to create any growth at all is a complete and utter joke, as are this government. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Lots of voice notes coming in this morning, so let us get right to them. Here's one from Mark on the Labour Party.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. These days, every time I hear one of these Labour Party government clowns speaking, I keep waiting for them to say Shazam at the end of a sentence or abracadabra. They seem to think that they can influence the direction of travel on the big issues just by saying things. You can tell that when they're interviewed. What we're saying on this is, what we're saying on that is. They say lots, but they don't actually do anything. And this is what Rachel from customer service is trying to do now. She's trying to influence the economy just by saying things. There'll be a third runway, Shazam.
Abracadabra. It's a very good point. Well made by Mark there. It's true. It's almost as if we're being run by some kind of circus troupe, right? You know, here comes the high-flying trapeze act. What's her name? It's Rachel from Accounts. She's got the leotard on. It's got spangles coming off it. You know, there's some floodlights going around. A couple of elephants coming around the corner. Maybe there's some woman riding a horse bareback and she then stands up on it. You know, that's literally what we're seeing with this government. Nothing works. And at the end, the circus tent collapses in on everybody and they all suffocate. And that's the end. Thank you very much indeed. Ben Habib is here, former MEP, of course. Ben, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I mean, I can't help but now see the Labour government in that format as a sort of circus troupe with the adoring children sitting in the front row waiting for something magical to happen, but it all goes horribly wrong, and either the tent collapses or the elephants die or something. But there's nothing going on, is there? I mean, this idea that somehow growth is all going to be completely and utterly cemented into this country by building a third runway at Heathrow that won't actually be ready until 2050. I mean, it's nonsense, isn't it?
Well, it's the first time I've actually seen the Labour Party performing performative politics.
Yeah.
Making promises that they know they can't keep. And I think she's done it deliberately. She's done it so that she can give people the impression that she's not that green, for one, and that she's going to drive growth, that over the heads of Ed Miliband and other people in her cabinet, she's going to put this third runway in. It's going to make, put Heathrow back on the map as one of the biggest airports in the world, and so on and so forth. And it's all performative because she knows she's not going to have to do it. But she'll be able to wrap herself in the cloak of a so-called growth agenda, while absolutely knowing all the time that all it is, as you say, a circus act. And it's quite clever, really, because, we're all talking about it. It's taken our eyes away from the huge damage she's done to the economy already.
Yeah.
I mean, if she was really serious about growth, she'd reverse the increase in employers' national insurance. She wouldn't go through with the employment rights bill that she's going through. She wouldn't go through with the rent reform bill that would, damage her ownership and so on. She wouldn't go through with the new law that they're bringing in for businesses to keep an account of the ethnicity wage gap, which is going to burden businesses even more and make employment even more difficult. There's so many things she could do which would cost the government nothing and would reduce costs and boost business. Yeah. She's not doing any of those. She targets something which she knows she can't deliver.
Yeah. It is remarkable, isn't it? You're right. I mean, it is all a distraction because, I mean, I can't quite believe how much obsession has been placed upon this whole idea of a third runway at Heathrow. I mean, I've got messages coming in from all parts of Britain saying, nobody cares about Heathrow Airport. If you live in Scotland, what goes on at Heathrow matters not a jot. And, I mean, for an awful lot of people, airports in London don't mean anything. I mean, I think if they were suddenly to expand it, that would be one thing. But, I mean, can you imagine the chaos? This country can't even put, the HS2 project together, because the bats, they cost them something like £100 million extra to create a bat tunnel because they were worried that we're killing a few bats on the way to putting a train service in. She's now going to build a train service between Oxford and Cambridge, who absolutely nobody will want to use. I mean, everybody knows if you go to Oxford, you don't go to Cambridge. If you go to Cambridge, you don't go to Oxford. What's the point of a bloody train line running between the two cities?
Absolutely right. And, talk about saving money. She could perhaps not buy new shoes and new clothes for illegal migrants who've entered the country.
Can you believe that?
That would save a bit of money. And
I mean, that is the final kind of ignominy, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, after everything that we've heard, after all the nonsense about legal aid and lawyers that they get given, hotel rooms that they get given, food that they get given, credit cards they can use, phones that they get given for free, we now find out we're actually kitting them out with lots of designer gear because they might be a bit wet from the trip. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And we have, moving on to the migrant thing, we now have a playbook which we can adopt in this country. Donald Trump has set it out for us.
Right.
If France won't take these people back to France, which is where they came from,
yeah,
well, then we should impose sanctions on France. I know people listening will go, well, Ben, how can you impose sanctions on France? Well, I'll tell you how we do it. We remove all the fishing licenses for their boats that come into our water with our consent to take our fish.
Right.
Often killing a hell of a lot more than they need, abusing the environmental integrity of British waters, abusing us, therefore, taking back these fish. And here we are, taking these migrants. Instead of paying the French the thick end of £1 billion, which is what we've done, trying to cajole them into stopping these illegal migrants crossing the channel, take strong action.
Yeah.
Say, sod you.
Right. Well, as you say, take a
know.
leaf out of Donald Trump's book when he dealt with Colombia, somewhere between the 6th hole and the 8th hole down at Mar-a-Lago, when they said they weren't going to take any of his migrants back. You know, you say to them, how about this? We'll put 25% tax levy, a tariff on all the wine and champagne that you export to the UK. And I'm pretty sure they would sit up and take notice of that. But of course, we won't do that because there'll be somebody sitting in the Department of Trade going, oh, but they might charge us 25% if we export things to Europe. Well, good. Let them do it. And then, you know, we can make more of our relationships with the United States of America.
Well, absolutely, Mike. And you can't put a price on the protection of this country.
No.
And what we're seeing is an assault of the United Kingdom, effectively by France, because it's the French who allow these people to cross the channel unchecked.
Yeah.
We're seeing an assault on our country, and our country's security has to come first.
Absolutely.
And the other thing I'd just say is that we run, and we still run, a £100 billion deficit with the European Union every year. That means the trade for the European Union with Britain is much more important to them than it is to us. They're running the surplus. So let's impose tariffs on them if they won't get a grip of their own borders, and they won't. I mean, for example, they should get rid of the Schengen zone. Germany is waking up to the need for that. France should wake up to the need for that. The EU should wake up for the need to that. And if they don't wake up to it, impose tariffs.
Yeah.
Cease doing trade. Take back fishing licenses. Be aggressive. Be aggressive. Don't be timid and taking the knee perpetually to these powers who are damaging British interests.
Of course, but what we now know about Keir Starmer is that he thinks the answer to everything is to change the law. You know, because he's a lawyer. I mean, the idea that we're going to sort of suddenly see changes in the way that people decide to enter the country illegally because you make it more illegal is a joke. I mean, they're coming here already because it's illegal.
So right.
They don't care about the law. I mean, I'm reading a story here. It says Labour's landmark law to tackle the small boats crisis will retain the ban on migrants claiming modern slavery protections, the powers to detain child migrants, and a string of other controversial measures that the party previously strongly opposed. It doesn't matter. You might as well say, you know, if you're part of the Labour government, you know, everybody who comes in here illegally is going to be painted yellow because you know they won't do it. It just won't happen. You know, we were speaking to one of our listeners who left a voice note earlier who said, you know, that everything that they do, they say they're going to do things, but they don't actually do them. You know, I've said before, everything they promise to do, they don't do, and then everything they do, they promise not to do.
I mean, you could sort illegal migration out. Perhaps not overnight, but you could sort it out very quickly with three things. One, the imposition of sanctions on countries that allow the trade of people in the way that they are and coming across the channel. Secondly, a policy of detaining and deporting all those that come to this country illegally. And if we can't deport them, they remain incarcerated until we can deport them.
Right.
And then thirdly, actually stopping people crossing the channel.
Yeah.
Get a dedicated force in the channel like the Belgians have, a force that uses fast boats, well-trained people, drones, sensors, all that sort of thing, barricades, and stop these dinghies and say, no, go back to France. So physical action, punitive action on those countries who allow the trade to continue, and then take a criminal justice approach to those that have entered our country illegally.
Right.
And it would stop. It would stop, wouldn't it, Mike?
Of course it would. I mean, look at this. Keir Starmer will unveil new counter-terrorism-style powers to target people smugglers, including plans to seize mobile phones and financial assets. Well, hang on.
Yeah.
We give them mobile phones when they land. So what's the point of seizing them once they've already thrown them into the sea? It then goes, Border Force officers will also be authorised to stop and search migrants arriving in small boats. Well, why aren't we searching them now? You know, they could be bringing all sorts of contraband with them. They could be smuggling drugs. They could have some kind of explosives on them. Why are we not searching these bloody people as soon as they walk off the boat?
Well, they themselves shouldn't be on that boat. You know, they are the contraband. The illegal migrants are the contraband.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be allowed in the country.
Yeah.
That's it, full stop.
We've got, you know, people like J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States of America, who says, you know, if you're a criminal, basically, and you come into our country, we want to kick you out. We don't want you. He said, I don't want you in my country. And very cleverly, they basically said, the White House press secretary, the new one, said, yeah, they're all criminals because they've entered the country illegally. Doesn't matter what else they do. Because they've entered the country illegally, they are immediately called a criminal. And that way you can kick them out.
And that's what Suella Braverman had tried to do with her Illegal Migration Act.
Right.
When she crafted the bill, it was called the Illegal Migration Act, and anyone who entered the country illegally would be denied asylum. The Secretary of State was required to detain them, and then required to make efforts to deport them. And when the bill became an act, instead of the Secretary of State being obliged to do all of that, the wording was diluted down, and it gave the Secretary of State the right to do it. So from going, it went from being a strong act to being an incredibly weak one. And that is symptomatic of our government, an inability to actually do what's right. Suella Braverman had exactly the right idea, and then as it went through the processes, through the Commons and so on, it became a pointless act. And so we see no one being detained and deported under the Illegal Migration Act. Do you remember? It came with such fanfare, that act.
Well, according to her critics, she was basically using the language of the 1930s, and they were trying to make out that she was some kind of Nazi sympathiser. And this country is riddled with absolute and utter numpties who don't even seem to understand the damage that's being done to the country by their policies.
And one of the things that I'm working on now is actually shifting that Overton window so that speaking common sense isn't regarded as politically unacceptable. What Donald Trump said on his first day as president when he announced those various policies, the vast majority of British citizens, by the way, support those policies.
They do.
But our politicians feel scared of simply talking about some of them. We wouldn't get politicians saying they want to abolish DEI. We don't get politicians, with the exception of a handful, who say they want to ditch net zero. We don't get politicians, with the exception of a handful, who say they want to enforce our borders. All of this is basic good governance. Do the right thing. So I'm working on an initiative to actually move the Overton window to a position where our politicians more broadly have the cover required to feel comfortable saying what it is that Donald Trump is actually doing. And I hope that with the more he does, the more comfortable we and our...
That's what I hope will happen as well. I mean, if you move the Overton window far enough towards me, I might just hurl myself out of it. But let's have a look at Donald Trump and what he's actually saying about migrants. Check this out.
I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo.
Brilliant. I mean, it brings a smile to your face, isn't it? We're just going to send them to Guantanamo, leave them there. There's no question of what happens to them when they get there. They're just going to die there, probably.
I mean, Guantanamo has a great reputation for being a blooming awful place, doesn't it? And so he's using it effectively. He's saying, you come here, you commit criminal activity, you're going to Guantanamo, buddy.
And by contrast, here's some breaking news from our government. Right? Ofcom has said that it is proposing to scrap second-class post deliveries on Saturdays and reduce the service to be on alternate weekdays. Brilliant.
Yeah,
well, that's
that's the breakdown of the British economy.
Yeah,
that's symptomatic. And we're going to get much more of that, Mike, aren't we?
Yeah.
As we run out of money. Local councils, by the way, just a quick statistic. In 2024, lost £2.5 billion in aggregate. Forecast to go up to $9.5 billion by 2026. We are going bust. And Rachel Reeves is fiddling, or playing a fiddle or fiddling, either will do, while we go bust.
Yeah. She really is. It's shocking to see. Ben, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Ben Habib, former MEP there, talking absolute common sense, which is what Donald Trump talks, which is what you all talk, which is what we do here at Talk. But the government, give me a small break. Chris is in Epsom. Let's get what he wants to say. Chris, very good morning to you.
Morning. Before I talk about Rachel from Accounts' dead cat on the table, a news flash for you. They found Miliband.
Yeah, have they? Where is he?
Yeah, he's in the underground car park at Westminster, the Palace of Westminster. He's handcuffed to the steering wheel, saying it's not fair. I've got to keep my car.
Very good. Excellent. It's hard to get out of that car park in Westminster. I've tried it. It's got a very funny exit strategy. Anyway, go on. What can you tell us about the third runway?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, this is a scramble. The Silicon Valley and the third runway. The third runway we know would be 20 years at least. Silicon Valley, what a joke.
Yeah.
Oxford has given planning permission for 2,000 new houses, all right?
Yeah.
Currently, the water company there can only deal with 70% of the wastage that's the wastewater that is created.
Right.
So they're dumping on a regular basis.
Right. Into the river?
Yeah, into the rivers.
That's nice, isn't it?
There's 1,800 unlicensed outfalls, which are supposed to be licensed and monitored.
Right.
But did you know that they've cut back on the EPA so much that the EPA don't monitor it anymore? They ask the water companies for the figures.
Brilliant.
Absolutely. Now, going back to what should be done.
Yes.
If she really wants to make an improvement immediately in growth, all right, forget about the third runway.
Yeah.
Open up the existing runway at Gatwick and use the money for the runway at Heathrow to finish HS2.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense to me. I mean, why wait 20 or 30 years for something that's not really ever going to happen properly anyway, to what will end up becoming an absolute nightmare of a situation? Can you imagine what Heathrow will be like for the 20 years that they're building the third runway?
Well, it would destroy business.
It would.
Around the M25.
It would, of course. And it's already, limit up, isn't it? It's already terrible.
Yeah, you've got a runway at Gatwick. You've got a second runway.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. Good idea. Good to talk to you. Chris in Epsom there, making perfect sense. Steve from Middlesbrough says, I watched about 5 seconds of Rachel from accounts yesterday. I thought she looked petrified and embarrassed. Simon says, Mike, the Labour growth plan is basically the Emperor's new clothes. And Nigel in Derby says, the only expansion and growth attached to Heathrow Runway 3 will be the bank accounts of Keir Starmer's lawyer friends. Absolutely right. Nicola from Norfolk says, morning, Mike. I don't usually like Michael O'Leary, but he was brilliant and spot on yesterday. Should we have another little look at that? Here's Michael O'Leary talking about the third runway scenario.
I get a letter back this week from some dopey junior minister, James Murray, who's the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. He helpfully told me that actually the rate of APD increase is only going up by £2 for those flying short-haul economy. That is 1% of an average airfare. £2 is 1% of an average short-haul economy low fare. I don't know what airline this dopey git actually flies on that has economy airfares of £200. But the £2 is not 1% of an average airfare. But it probably shows you just how out of touch Her Majesty's Treasury are with reality.
Yeah, absolutely right. Michael O'Leary, what a hero. Graham, who says he's chirpy, says this, I'm now 68 this year. We all know politicians lie, but this government are the worst I've ever known. And they do it openly, and they know it. He says, great show. I fall about laughing every morning. Well, it's true. I mean, you have to, don't you? It's incredible. I mean, breaking news. Ofcom has said it's proposing to scrap second-class postal deliveries on Saturdays. OK. Trump's sending 30,000 illegal migrants to Guantanamo Bay. You tell me which is the better policy. This is Talk.
last full-length runway in Britain was built in the 1940s. No progress in 80 years. A third runway could increase potential GDP by 0.43% by 2050.
Could a new runway be built that abides with carbon targets, concerns around noise pollution and concerns around air pollution?
That a third runway at Heathrow would unlock further growth, boost investment, increase exports and make the UK more open and more connected.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:28. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here. The sun is just about coming up over the horizon. It's not looking particularly wet so far today. It's not been a great week, but we're nearly at the end of January, ladies and gentlemen, so there is hope out there because it will soon be a brand new month and we can see what we can get on with then. Let's get a quick voice note from Sean on Donald Trump.
Morning, Mike. Sean from Grimsby here again. Another fabulous day of Donald Trump. So now he's deporting the old pro-Hamas supporting foreigners. God, don't it make you wish that we had someone over here with the stones to do that? Oh, what an excellent move. Great show, Mike.
Thank you very much. You would like that to be seen, wouldn't it? The news came out last night. He's ordered the deportation of foreign students who took part in pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses, particularly those who were supporting very openly terrorist organisations, which are, of course, illegal in the United States of America as well. Rachel from Account says she wants more immigrants who are entrepreneurs, says Alan in Merseyside. She's just driven about 10 million millionaires out of the country. Yeah, that wasn't a great start, was it? But she was up yesterday telling us all that she's going to be breaking out the champagne because we're going to have a third runway at Heathrow. We've only waited so far about 22 years since the conversation began. Unfortunately, though, for her, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, doesn't agree. Thinks it's a really bad idea and he's promising to fight her every single step of the way. Let's talk to Martin McTague, OBE, National Chair of the Federation of Small Businesses, to find out what he makes of it all. Is it going to be growth? Is it ever going to happen? Is it going to be 2050 before we see a third runway? Does it really matter? Martin, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
So, what do you reckon? I mean, she seems to be putting an awful lot of stall in this idea that the third runway is going to kickstart the economy in Britain. But, I mean, if it's not going to arrive until 2050, I'm not quite sure how that's going to have any effect on the economy in the short term at all.
Yeah, well, we're used to excuses from government. You know, we've had planning blamed. We've had regulation blamed for infrastructure stopping. We've had the fact that judicial reviews have been constantly made as an excuse.
Yeah.
We haven't built a runway in this country for nearly 40 years.
Yeah.
So the fact that she's prepared to announce and face down some criticism within her own party about the Heathrow expansion, I think is a good sign.
Well, it's a good sign if it means anything, but I'm not sure it will mean anything because she's not just facing, criticism from people who don't think it's a good idea. She's facing criticism from people like Sadiq Khan, who's vowing to absolutely stop it from happening.
Yeah, she is. And for us, you know, the more important point is that small businesses have always been the source of growth. And what she's got to do is find ways of stimulating the passion that small businesses have put into to generate growth in the past. What we worry about is that if you take an organisation like HMRC, which is still deteriorating, its performance is poor. We're now facing the January deadline for your self-assessment, and again, the kind of reaction you get from HMRC is dreadful.
Yeah.
Employment rights bill is on the horizon, which is another major problem for small businesses. So these things are within the government's grasp and they could sort them out quickly.
Right. Well, the other problem you guys are going to have, as big companies are as well, is the national insurance hike as well. You know, come April, it's all going to be a lot more expensive. When I talk to small business owners all the time, some of them in hospitality, some of them in other parts of different sectors of the economy, and they're all saying, you know, this is either going to wipe out our profit from last year, or it's going to, you know, the increase in minimum wage as well. You know, it's going to make our costs rise sort of exponentially to a point where much of what we do is going to be very difficult.
Well, that's true, but about half the employers in the country were protected from that increase because they employ 10 or less employees. The big companies can manage this. The people I worry about are the mid-sized companies, the ones who haven't got the resources to manage this, who will have to say, no, you're not getting a pay increase, or we're going to have to lay you off, or your overtime's being cancelled. Yeah. That's the kind of reaction that I worry about.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, one of the people I speak to on a regular basis, he said, and he's got, you know, a couple of businesses up in Scotland, it's going to cost him £250,000. You know, and that's a lot of money for a small business to have to suddenly find, which last year they didn't have to find.
Absolutely, you know, and in a way, it's outsourcing bad news. You know, government, if it had taken the responsibility to put up income tax or VAT, they would have had to explain it to the country. This way, they're outsourcing the bad news to employees. Right. Yes.
So what would you say to Rachel Reeves then, if she was sitting in front of you and you had an opportunity to say, this is what you need to do in this next sort of 10 months before the end of the year to actually create proper growth? Because I don't really see that the Heathrow plan is going to do anything, certainly not in the short term.
Well, I think the Heathrow plan is a good signal. I don't want to pour cold water on that. I know there's a lot of cynicism about it, but as far as I'm concerned, there are major things she could do to try and reverse things within the Treasury, and one of the biggest things would be to knock HMRC into shape.
Right, just to make it more efficient, apart from anything else, you mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good thinking. Martin McTague, OBE, thank you very much indeed. National Chair, Federation of Small Businesses. Tim in Leicester has sent in a note about the plane crash in Washington, D.C., the breaking news that we got this morning. He says, morning, Mike, every time I've been in D.C., I've watched the planes depart from Reagan Airport, and I've always commented that if anything was to happen on departure, the first thing to hit would be the Washington Monument or the White House. I can't believe that helicopters were allowed to fly so close to the airport. It's just incredible that it happened on final approach and not on departure, saving many more lives. Very, very tragic indeed, says Tim in Leicester. Yeah, I know. I mean, it really is a terrible situation. If you're just joining us, the breaking news this morning is that the American Airlines passenger jet with 60 passengers on board and 4 crew has collided with a Black Hawk helicopter over the Potomac River. You can see the actual incident as we're watching the skies right here over Washington, D.C. You can see that big flash as there was an approach being made by this American Airlines plane coming into Washington, D.C. from Wichita, Kansas, we understand. Happened around 9 p.m. local time. It is a rescue operation currently going on because everyone from that plane, the plane appears to have ended up in the Potomac River, and it's a rescue operation. So far, I think 18 bodies have been recovered, but it's very dark, it's very cold, and it's very, very grim. We'll bring you details when we get them, right here on Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:38. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until, of course, 10 o'clock. We've got Donald Trump, of course, making news pretty much every single day. We just saw him talking about sending migrants to Guantanamo Bay, 30,000 of them to Guantanamo Bay, the most dangerous and bad criminals that he's got in the United States. Didn't give any suggestion as to whether they would ever leave Guantanamo Bay unless they left in a box. Because apparently they're not going to be moved anywhere else because they don't want to send them back to their home countries. Here he is talking about federal employees going back to work in the office.
As everyone knows, most of the time they're not working, they're not very productive, and it's unfair to the millions of people in the United States who are in fact working hard from job sites and not from their home. As federal employees, they must meet a high standard. They're representing our government. They're representing our country. If they don't agree by February 6th to show up back to work in their office, they will be terminated, and we will therefore be downscaling our government, which is something that the last 10 presidents have tried very hard to do but fail.
Yeah, well, look out, I would say. If you're not going to get in the office from Monday to Friday, you're going to be terminated. And that's a fact, and that's what Donald Trump's going to do. Bill in Cheshire says, Heathrow expansion, this is all a huge diversion, which most of the media have fallen for. It's never going to happen. Nobody this week will be talking about the important stuff and exposing the ongoing failure of this useless government. You may well be right. Let's talk to Jonathan Conricus now, though, former IDF spokesman, because Hamas are due to release some more hostages today. 3 Israeli hostages, I believe, and 5 Thai hostages as sort of the third release date since the ceasefire was announced a couple of weeks ago. Jonathan, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, how are you?
Yeah, very well indeed. I mean, so far, this whole situation seems to be going according to plan, doesn't it? I mean, it's always pretty unedifying to watch Hamas in their military fatigues and their bandanas and balaclavas and all the rest of it, toting their guns around and terrorising everybody, including women who are being released. But so far, they seem to be sticking to their word. Is that how you see it?
Yes, there's a lot happening behind the scenes. By the way, it's interesting you mentioned the whole choreography. Do you know that a current Al Jazeera so-called journalist was hired by Hamas to choreograph these events? Quite amazing, quite astonishing. But you can see that there's a lot of detail to the how things are presented, to the symbolism of everything, and it makes sense that there's a Al Jazeera guy behind it. But more to the purpose of the matter, we are now, as we're speaking, there's the Red Cross is on their way to the extraction point in order to collect 2 Israeli hostages, 1 young woman and an elderly man. And as you said, today we're also expecting 5 Thai nationals. Hamas is going ahead, and I think that, you know, both sides, Israel and Hamas, we have the incentive to continue and complete this deal, the first installment, the 33. The big question is, and where it will get sticky, is where do we go from here? Right. Do we continue, because there are 65 additional Israeli hostages held in Gaza by Hamas and other terrorists, and those negotiations are ongoing now. That will be the fork in the road. Will Hamas continue and give back hostages, or will they hold on to hostages? And if they do, what will Israel do about it?
Right. And some people have expressed concern about that footage that we've just been looking at there, and what would appear to be an awful lot of very nasty-looking Hamas terrorists. Are you of the opinion that there's still quite a lot of Hamas terrorists knocking around, or was this the new generation of them, or how is that all going?
I am of the opinion that they've come out of hiding. They were in the tunnels for a long time. They hid underneath their own civilians, waited for the storm to pass, and once the coast was clear, they emerged, and with ironed uniforms and their green bandanas to claim victory. The sad thing is that they're not dead. And the sad thing is that we haven't yet eradicated Hamas. And the fact that they can come out of hiding and claim to be victorious is a problem. And to be frank, Israel has not yet achieved what it set out to achieve after Hamas attacked it on October 7. We need to say that. And there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. For people who are listening who care a lot about Palestinians on a human level, I have this to say. If you care about the reconstruction of Gaza, then your priority should be getting rid of Hamas, because there will be no reconstruction of Gaza as long as Hamas is in power. So if you care about Palestinians, you better help get rid of Hamas, apply pressure on Qatar and Egypt to do exactly the same and to find diplomatic solutions. Otherwise, the other option on the table is to go back to war.
Yeah. I mean, somebody said to me, it's interesting, isn't it, they're very happy to put their uniforms back on and wave their guns around now that they know nobody's going to shoot them.
Yes, and now that they know that they're relatively safe, but, you know, there's a lot happening also behind the scenes. We are monitoring events. Israel is monitoring what's going on, where they're coming out from, where they're convening. There's a lot happening, and even these propaganda setups that Hamas has with the help of Al Jazeera, even these setups, they're used to it, and I think that they will come in handy once we go back to fighting, which I sadly think it's a matter of when, not if. I don't think, my personal assessment, this is not an official Israeli assessment, my personal assessment is that I do not see a scenario where Hamas hands over all of our hostages. And I think that they will hold on to hostages for leverage and in order to stay in power. And that will force Israel to go back to fighting. Now, that will probably be unpopular around the world. And people will be asking, why does Israel have to go back to fighting? And I'll preempt that and say that as long as Hamas exists, Israel isn't safe, and 2 million Palestinians are oppressed in Gaza, held hostage by this madman of an organization. Right. And that's the reason.
And I don't know whether you can answer this question, but have any of the hostages so far that have come out been able to help the Israeli authorities with locations, or, you know, what they saw, how many people they saw that Hamas had sort of now re-recruited, if you like, or, you know, how powerful they are?
Yes, that is ongoing. Envision it like a 3D puzzle, a giant 3D puzzle, where Israeli intel officers are working to try to fill a very complex puzzle about location, personnel, time, etc. And they're piecing a lot of information together. The number one priority is the well-being of the hostages and having them come back to their families, to see faces of people they love, and to reconnect with civilization, and to understand that they're safe, and of course medically to take care of them. There's a lot of medical things that need to happen, a lot of nutrients and supplements and things that they need very quickly in order to get back in a good condition. But from an intel perspective, that is ongoing, and yes, Israeli intel officers are doing that. The way that we will answer that question is the next time that we'll start fighting, and how fast we will get to locations where hostages are held. That'll be the answer to it. But I am certain that these efforts are ongoing, and I hope that they are yielding information that will make it easier for Israel to get to our hostages.
Good stuff. Well, we wish you luck with it all, of course. As ever, Jonathan, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Jonathan Conricus there, former IDF spokesperson on the release of more hostages today. 2 Israelis and 5 Thai hostages, we believe, will be released today. But the tension goes on, the horror goes on for some more hostages who have yet to be released. We'll keep you updated, of course, on all of that as well. Let's get a voice note from Perry.
Morning, Mike. There was a lot of things in the budget that were hidden. I mean, I was looking at changing my cab this year, and then I found out the first year's road tax is going to be £1,660 for the first year, and then £630 a year after that. And that stupid woman thought that she could win me back over, soften the blow, by offering me a penny off a pint of beer. What an idiot.
Yeah, that is not really something that adds up at all, is it? It is absolutely and utterly economically completely illiterate that Rachel Reeves thinks that what she's doing with one hand is going to be somehow, you know, measured up by what she's doing with the other hand, and that somehow the balance will be found. She's never going to build a third runway at Heathrow. We heard from the small businesses just a moment ago who said it's a step in the right direction. It's a good sign. Well, except only it's a good sign if it actually happens. If it doesn't happen, which is the most likely outcome, I would have said, then it's not a good sign at all. And in 25 years' time, we might see a third runway at Heathrow, but it's an unlikely scenario, isn't it? And you've also got all sorts of other big projects that have been going on in this country for a while, including not only HS2, but also the Lower Thames Crossing. I've got Dodo, who sent me this tweet saying that the Lower Thames Crossing was another infrastructure project talked about by Rachel from accounts. It's already cost £800 million without a sod being turned. That's 8 bat tunnels and a lot of consultants' wages. Well, there is a tunnel being tunnelled, if you like, underneath the Thames, right next to the Blackwall Tunnel. It is actually underway. It's been delayed, that's true, but supposedly it's going to open sometime in the next couple of months, I think I'm right in saying. But it has, of course, cost loads more money than it was meant to, and there's not going to be any point to it, because what you're going to do then is create twice as much traffic going into the same roads on both sides of the river, which is going to be also a toll put on it as well. So that is not exactly going to be a recipe for success. This from Daniel, who says, I noticed Ed Siliband was on the missing list yesterday. Was he in his Islington mud hut doing a decent thing and falling on his sword? Or was he round the corner at Cafe de Nut Zero, choking on a recycled plasterboard and dandelion sandwich? Neither, I suspect. Excellent show, Daniel in Surrey. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up, we're going to talk about the crime figures. They're up again. I mean, they're good at that, at least, the Labour government. They can put those up. Not a problem at all. It's a shame they can't make us all richer. They just keep making us poorer. This is Talk.
Killed growth. This is all panic, isn't it? This is a good case to sack the Chancellor.
No, complete rubbish. Come on, look, you saw today a strong Chancellor in control of the agenda for this country.
Really? Or a panicking Chancellor pivoting and trying to U-turn?
Panicking. You're creating a fiction, Harry.
Would you like the job if she...
It was a great speech today, setting out this government's agenda, why the plan for change is working, the plan for change that the British people voted for, with a historic landslide for a Labour government. We're getting on with the job of the change that we promised in delivering, and that is a great thing for the country.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:53. Coming up in the next hour, Peter Hitchens is going to join us. He's going to have a lot to say about, I'm sure, all manner of things, including what on earth is going on at the heart of this government and what on earth is happening with the Heathrow third runway. 22 years it's been in the making, and so far we still don't have anything like a runway. But one of the things that they can at least have an effect on the Labour government, the crime stats and the crime figures that have come out later on this morning at 9:30 will show probably that losses from theft in shops have reached epic proportions. We know that retail violence and abuse has increased by over 50% and to more than 2,000 incidents every single day, basically. So shoplifting is just now epidemic proportions. Let's talk to Mike Neville, ex-Scotland Yard detective. Of course, Mike, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I mean, it's hard to believe, isn't it, just how bad this has got. You know, I was saying sort of jokingly earlier that I'm one of those old-fashioned shoppers. You know, I go up and actually pay for what I want before I leave the building with the goods, and it's almost as though it's becoming a sort of dying breed, that.
Yeah, you're becoming part of the minority, I think. It's truly shocking, isn't it? And what we see is this increase in violence is because the thieves, they think they're now entitled to steal. So if anybody even challenges them as they try to walk out, then there'll be people are assaulted, they'll be threatened with needles or knives. I was just speaking to two ladies in a local shop near me. Every day people come in and steal, they threaten them, we know where you live. And these people are walking out with, you know, in 5 minutes what these ladies are earning, you know, the goods to the value of what they're earning in a 10-hour shift. So it becomes like society becomes at risk when being the thief becomes the best option and obeying the rules is the really stupid option.
And the worry that I've got, and we know about the kind of mobile phone theft epidemic that's going on as well. 1,000 mobile phones a week, I think, have been stolen from people in London, just snatched off them. I wonder and worry as well whether we'll get to a point in some cities like London where if you're walking around with anything of value whatsoever, and I include in that, you know, some shopping that you might have just bought, that people are just going to come up and take it off you.
That's right. I mean, you were the victim of a phone theft, and somebody had their hands on my phone at Charing Cross Station and managed to sort of bat it off.
Yeah.
But it's out of control, and the cost of this is on us all. So a $2 billion per year loss rate in the retail shops, and nearly $2 billion are spent on trying to prevent this stuff. So that's £4 billion these companies have got to find, and that's what we'll be paying for. But the real issue here is the police do not have the systems to deal with this. So the evidence in these cases is CCTV, as you're showing on there. But unlike fingerprints and DNA, the police have no national image database when it comes to CCTV images. So if thieves, and these are organised thieves, you know, to the point where baby milk is shipped to Vietnam and things like that. These are very organised people. So they cross borders. If you just go from one different force to another force, they'll never match you. And the scandal is, despite all this money spent on CCTV, some forces have an identification rate from those images as low as 7%.
Wow.
So 92% of suspects caught on CCTV are not identified.
Yeah. And so, I mean, what could you do to improve that? Is it just because you can't tell who they are? Is it because the quality's not so good, or because nobody really knows who they are? What is it?
Well, it's a lack of systems in the police. So my expertise is catching people with images.
Yeah.
And so I had the record, and my team had the record. They caught a guy for 43. They matched him to 43 different crimes. But the police don't gather images like they gather fingerprints and DNA. They don't link the crimes together in the same way. And there's no database at all. And not only that, the Home Office, they don't measure what the police do with images. So the Home Office measures if police forces are using fingerprints and DNA. They don't measure the use of images. And in the organisations like the police, what gets measured gets done.
Yeah.
And so they just allow this to go on. But the reality is, this puts shop workers at risk. It puts the cost of goods up for all the general public, and it just creates a lawless society which eats away at what brings us all together and keeps us in a community.
Cool. Because if they knew that they were being filmed and they knew that they might have a likelihood of being picked up as a result of that, they probably wouldn't do it. I mean, now they don't care because, like you say, they don't care that they're being filmed because they know there's a pretty good chance that they won't be identified.
So exactly right. The CCTV is only a deterrent if they know that either they or their confederates have been arrested and put in jail for it.
Yeah.
But the shops are doing... I've spoken to shop organisations and said they've got... literally, if they want the police to do something, they've got to do more because the police are inept at the moment. The police are not dealing with this as they should be. The only way is to say to the police, here's a file, this man has committed 10, 20, 30 crimes, we want you to do something about it. When they give them just one crime, the police will just write it off, or it's a little amount of goods. But the people who are stealing, you know, £100 worth of goods in one shop, they'll be doing 10 of those thefts a day. These people are absolutely prolific. And it is not, as some left-wing people will portray it, some old dear stealing a tin of salmon to feed herself and her cat. These are organised villains who are stealing, often to order.
Yeah, absolutely right. Mike, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Mike Neville, ex-Scotland Yard, a detective there. Coming up in the next hour, Peter Hitchens is going to join us. Alan in Merseyside says the third runway at Heathrow means the final end of the net zero madness because of emissions from extra aircraft. Gary in Shrewsbury says, Mike, this idiot Rachel from accounts is banging on about growing the economy with this new runway, but she's destroying the economy with her budget. What a complete and utter idiot this woman is. Great show. I mean, you can't say fairer than that. And Mickey Wallington says the Heathrow announcement is simply distraction politics by government and Chancellor in trouble. I don't think there's any doubt about that. You know, once you start talking about big existential projects like HS2 and like a third runway and like all sorts of crossings under rivers, you know, it's all about sort of building reputations and building legacies and building things that you will be remembered for. Will they call it Rachel's Runway? I very much doubt it. This is Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
Time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in. An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
back to Morning Glory. 2 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. We have been here since 6 o'clock. 4 glorious hours coming up every single weekday morning from here to 10 o'clock. 6 o'clock is when we start. 10 o'clock is when we finish. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here after that. Got lots and lots of news for you this morning, including the breaking news as we started the show that American Airlines passenger jet with 60 passengers and 4 crew on board has collided in mid-air with a Black Hawk helicopter over the Potomac River while landing at Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. Around about 9 p.m. local time. It happened last night. As you watch this vision in front of you on the screen, you can actually see the flashpoint where the mid-air collision actually happens. The plane was coming in to land, having arrived from Wichita, Kansas, we understand, with those people on board. So far, 19 bodies have been recovered from the river. It is basically a rescue operation right now, it would appear, sadly, because unfortunately it doesn't look as if anyone has survived. We'll keep you updated with that as well. Also, in the last hour, we were talking to Jonathan Conrickas, former spokesman for the IDF, and we've got a live feed coming through to us right now in which we can see hostages actually being released right now by Hamas as part of the ceasefire deal. 5 Thai hostages coming out today, as well as 3 Israelis. We'll keep you again updated with all of that. We're also talking about Rachel Reeves and the 3rd runway at Heathrow. Not only does she think that is going to submit the country to some kind of growth spurt, even though many people don't believe it will be done much before 2050, she's also opening up a new railway line between Oxford and Cambridge. Peter Hitchens will talk to us about that. But let's get a voice note, a montage of what people are saying.
Morning, Mike. It's James from Blackburn. Rachel looked like she didn't believe a single word she was saying yesterday. Absolutely terrible.
These days, every time I hear one of these Labour Party government clowns speaking, I keep waiting for them to say Shazam at the end of a sentence or abracadabra. There'll be a 3rd runway. Shazam.
It is a bit like that, isn't it? I was likening it earlier to a kind of a circus troupe. People that come out and want you to go, ooh, and ah, every time they say anything, and be amazed at some of the things that they can do on the high wire trapeze act. Well, I'm afraid they're doing it without a safety net, and it's all going a bit wrong. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Growth spurt? I don't think so. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Welcome back to Morning Glory. You're watching live footage right now in Gaza of hostages being released by Hamas. It's the usual kind of circus atmosphere there as well, where a lot of men with guns dressed as Hamas militants are escorting a car with the hostages inside. It's a Red Cross car. Red Cross, of course, involved in all of them. What happens is Hamas hand the hostages over to the Red Cross. The Red Cross then take them across the border into Israel and hand them over to the Israeli authorities. So we'll keep watching that as those images come in. And once again, some pretty tasteless images for an awful lot of people watching it, with these armed men surrounding these hostages, 2 of whom I think are elderly in there. Last time it was 4 women, and it's all rather unedifying to watch, but at least they're being freed, so we should be thankful for that. Let's talk to Peter Hitchens, who's here as a part of the growth sector, I dare say, being in Oxford, because you're going to have the benefit, Peter, very good morning to you, of a new railway line, apparently.
Well, I wish that I thought that we would. I used to travel on that railway line before they madly closed it in 1968. Right. Amazingly, it wasn't on the list of tracks which the awful Lord Beeching had suggested should close on, basically on the orders of the very dubious Tory Transport Minister Ernest Marples. Harold Wilson just closed it, and no one really knows why. And it's particularly disastrous because it was a very rare thing in Britain, a railway line which ran from east to west rather than from north to south, which connected all the main lines out of London, and also had outside Oxford a special bypass for freight to travel east to west across the country, which was also gratuitously and stupidly closed. You have to wonder whether the Ministry of Transport at the time was actually the Ministry for Roads and trying to shut down what had up till then been a very effective railway network. I hope they open the railway again, though it's going to be difficult to do. But the idea that they should concrete over this part of the country and that it will create economic growth seems to me to be doubtful and also rather sad. It's not a beautiful part of the country, it was a very handsome one. And if you're at all familiar with John Bunyan's great classic, Pilgrim's Progress, It is the landscape in which that's set. Doubting Castle, the hill difficulty, and all the rest of it. They're all round there, and that's where Bunyan used to walk, and where the whole idea came into his head. And I think people should remember that as they rejoice over building more and more box homes all over that rather, as I say, secluded and peaceful region, which I used to bicycle across. I used to do an annual bike ride from Oxford to Cambridge, and become rather familiar with it. But I don't believe myself that this is the way to growth, and I don't think that it will create the sort of economic growth this country desperately needs, of reindustrialization, of people having proper jobs, making real things, which they sell to their fellow citizens.
No, I think that's right, and I don't think that many people are actually rejoicing about it, because when we look at the similar idea to expand the Heathrow, which has been talked about for 22 years and nothing's really happened, my initial thought was, if they even were to get into actually putting spades in the ground and doing anything around Heathrow, they would immediately, presumably, hurl that entire area around the M25 and around that part of London into a complete sort of gridlock situation, because apparently...
It would be horrible.
Yeah.
And also, it will destroy in lots of habitations. And I keep asking people, why is it exactly that having an extra runway at Heathrow is considered so beneficial for the country?
Right.
I don't see
what...
Again, there's as with HS2, which seems to be an entirely pointless vanity project. If you want to build railways in this country, and I wish people would, what we need is a medium-speed, reliable intercity network between all our cities, and a recreation of the rural net. Which was so important. So many quite major market towns in this country are no longer connected to the railway network, which forces people to rely on cars in a way which is very damaging both to the environment and to their health and to the countryside as a whole. That should be fixed. We made a grave mistake in the 1960s, shutting down that railway network, and we could put it back with the sort of money we're now proposing to spend on basically these vanity projects for which people wish to be remembered. I think that they want monuments. I think is often the case when vast, grand projects are suggested.
Yes, I mean, you've got a piece in the Spectator that I was just looking at.
Well, it's an old one I dug out because it's still relevant.
Yes, no, but I'm looking at the sort of the viaduct that you've got the steam train on there, and I assume that's no longer there.
No, that's a nice picture of a lovely viaduct in Scotland.
Is it?
Nothing to do with the Oxford to Cambridge line. I don't think that there used to be a sort of crawl over or flyover at Bletchley, but it didn't look anything like as spectacular as that. It's just the usual slightly illegitimate use of pictures by people on the internet.
Excellent. Good to know.
A nice viaduct, but
yes.
Not,
but I mean, I suppose my
right.
question then should be: would there be any part of what used to be the railway line between Oxford and Cambridge that they could use, or not really?
Oh, lots of it. Again, when I first started bicycling along it, parts of it still ran. They used to run an extraordinary thing, a Christmas special from Oxford to Milton Keynes for shoppers until privatisation. After privatisation, it began to decay, and in some very strange fashion, which is involving some completely unknown chemical or physical process, the tracks disappeared. I think they evaporated. I know one year they were there.
Sold off by anybody.
They weren't there anymore. Well, your guess is as good as mine. But gradually it got overgrown. There's a very important part of the old track too, round about Bedford, which got built over with houses, which made it very difficult to reinstate. It can be done with a bit of determination and money. It can be done, and it would be a very good thing if it is. It's ridiculous that these two beautiful cities are no longer linked by train. It was one of the favourite journeys of C.S. Lewis, the Narnia books man, who used to travel with his brother because he got a professorship in Cambridge regularly along that line, which he called the crawler. And it was a vital part of the railway system, and it was just to me it still remains a sign that we had and continue to have an anti-railway policy in this country. Anybody ever closed it? But I seem to remember the Tories saying they were going to open it as well, just as they went on about the third runway.
Right. Well, this is the thing.
Are often talked of.
Yeah, they're talked of, but this is the thing. I mean, in the Mail today, the suggestion being there's no chance of this third runway even appearing for 25 years, and that's probably optimistic, I would say.
Well, let me refer here to my home city of Oxford. There's a part of the long-term plan for the Oxford to Cambridge railway line has involved the building of a new platform at Oxford Station, which then involves the building of a wider bridge across the only road which connects the west and the east of the city. Well, they closed it, I think, about 18 months ago now. And the whole place is full of men in orange jackets standing around, and machinery going backwards and forwards with those strange loudspeakers saying, reversing, all the time, day and night, floodlights, pools of water, hose pipes, cables, diggers. Nothing happens.
Right.
The town has been divided. There's a thing I call it's a checkpoint where you have to shuffle through a narrow pedestrian tunnel between two sides of the city. Everybody's sick to death of it. Nobody knows when it will ever end. So the idea that they can, if they can't even widen one railway bridge in the centre of Oxford on time, the idea they can build a third runway for Heathrow Airport on time is fanciful. Nothing in this country is done properly anymore, and nobody can find out how this thing got into such a mess. And there's still no real idea of when it will be finished. And I think this is standard in grand projects in this country. Everything takes at least twice as long and costs at least twice as much.
And as you say, it also seems to involve twice as many people. You know, I've got the same problem. There's a building that's been going up next to London Bridge Station. I think it's actually going to be student housing eventually. But they've been working on it for literally years and years and years. And there's a sort of absolute plethora of orange-jacketed characters who stand around directing, and they're called traffic marshals. And I'm like, what are you doing? And all they seem to do is to stop you when you're in a car.
Do you remember the great Keith Waterhouse?
Yes, I do.
The column in the...
I used to drink with him in Costello's. I'm that old.
Well, he once wrote this book, Office Life. And what the point it made was that gradually the hero discovered that the vast office in which he worked, thousands of people, was completely pointless. He noticed after a while there were no telephones. Nobody could call in. All these people were sitting around. The thing had been created by a government which was incapable of running an economy to pretend that people had jobs. I think an awful lot of the construction industry is pretend jobs, really, to make up for that. We have no proper manufacturing industry. You noticed, I think, probably that during the Great Shutdown, during which we first bonded, that the construction industry was exempt from all the rules of shutting everything down. It carried on completely regardless, which struck me as very interesting. It has a special place in the hearts of politicians because, as I say, it soaks up an awful lot of what would otherwise be unemployment, gives the illusion that this country is industrial active. It isn't. And that's really the problem. If people want to rebuild...
Well, funny enough, I was
rebuilding the industry that was destroyed in the 80s.
Yeah, I was talking to a developer, funny enough, the other day about all this. I said, where are all these buildings that are going up everywhere you look in London and elsewhere? You know, I see housing projects sometimes as well, which I can understand people need houses. But a lot of the high-rises that are going up in London, I was like, who's like buying those? Who's moving into them? Canary Wharf, for example, is largely empty because most of the office buildings are no longer occupied by office workers. And he said basically what they do is they sell kind of, you know, a dividend, or they sell some kind of, you know, property right to own some part of the building that they're putting up, only so that you can sell it on to somebody who might want it in the future. But it's all a bit of a pyramid scheme, it seems to me.
Well, it's worse than that. Let me tell you a story about this. Somebody I know was trying to find someone to live in London, and contacted an estate agent in some part of South London where a large number of these new blocks have been built, and was being shown around one of the flats, and said to the agent, "What do you think? Do you think this would be a good place to bring up a family?" And the agent looked at him and said, "Are you crazy? Nobody lives here. These places are not built for people to live in. They're purely assets for investment purposes. If you move in here, you'll have no neighbours."
And that's the thing.
You look at those blocks, and that's the way it looks to me.
Because there aren't people. There aren't people in them. There's an entire building that went up next to our office here, built by the same sort of architect, and it looks very similar to our office building. But it's been finished and completed for at least the time that I've been working here, which is a good 4 or 5 years. And there's not one flat occupied. Not one of them has got anybody in it.
Yeah, and again, a lot of the housing which is built with the constant frenzy that the government has for building houses all over the countryside remains empty, it seems to me, for a lot of the time, and it or is too expensive for normal people to buy when it's completed. The idea that we will get ourselves out of economic trouble by building lots of houses and destroying large parts of our countryside forever, because you can't get it back once it's been built over. Again, seems to me to be wholly fanciful and gravely mistaken. And this pressure on people, you mustn't oppose the destruction of this woodland. You mustn't stand in the way of this development, because this is vital for the national development, and you're wrong to do it, and you're a NIMBY and despicable. I think this whole
it's very big state, isn't it?
What preserve the environment as obstructive is very, very dangerous, and we will regret it greatly. Just as, you know, the 1960s, huge amounts of hideous concrete development was allowed all over the place, which still spoils many towns and much of the country.
Well, look at the Barbican now. It looks awful.
The same sort of pressure. We must build, and then you have this hideous stuff, which it would take high explosive or more to actually get rid of.
Yeah.
And it's lost forever.
Yeah, it is, unfortunately. We've got to go, but thank you very much indeed. Peter Hitchens there on all manner of things, including growth. There isn't any growth. Building a runway at Heathrow isn't going to make any growth happen any faster. Neither is actually putting a railway in between Oxford and Cambridge. And Peter Hitchens is actually in favour of railways being put in, but even he says it won't cause any growth. Coming up, Ross Clark's going to join us. He says Labour is in a hole. They'll get growth only by slaying a few sacred cows, starting with net zero. Let's get a voice note from Ben.
Morning, Mike. Ben from Somerset speaking. I live in a rural area, and rural crime is completely out of control in our area. We're farmers, and we had two guys in balaclavas in our yard a couple of weeks ago trying to steal our double cab pickup. Friends and neighbours have had pickups, trailers, machinery stolen. Completely out of control.
It is out of control. I mean, this is what I was saying to Mike Neville. You know, when I walk the streets of London now, I think to myself, you know, if I did have something that was valuable, somebody might just come and take it off me. If I was carrying a shopping bag with a nice name on it, they might just take the shopping. It's happening to people. It's not just that they're breaking into your house or they're taking your phone. They're taking your watch, they're taking your necklaces, they're taking your earrings. You know, if you've got a ring, they might take that. It's just ridiculous. There's literally nobody stopping it. And that is Britain in 2025. You'd think the government might put a bit of importance and attach a bit of importance onto that. The breaking news, by the way, on the hostage front is that Israeli hostage Agam Berger, a soldier in the IDF, has been freed by Hamas. More hostages are expected to be released as part of the ceasefire deal, and that's due later on today. 3 Israelis and 5 Thai nationals. We'll bring you more detail when we get it. It's 20 past 8.
Killed growth. This is all panic, isn't it? This is a good case to sack the Chancellor.
No, complete rubbish. Come on, look, you saw today a strong Chancellor in control of the agenda for this country.
Really? Or a panicking Chancellor pivoting and trying to U-turn?
Panicking. You're creating a fiction, Harry.
Would you like the job if she...
It was a great speech today, setting out this government's agenda, why the plan for change is working, the plan for change that the British people voted for, with a historic landslide for a Labour government. We're getting on with the job of the change that we promised in delivering, and that is a great thing for the country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, take 23. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock, and that's when Julie Hartley-Brewer comes along and to take you through the next 3 hours. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Harry Cole, the political editor of The Sun. That's in the next hour. He's done an interview with the Deputy Chancellor of the Exchequer, I suppose you might say, who was talking to him about how great Rachel Reeves is doing and how brilliantly she's going. Darren Jones, I think his name is. Coming up, though, Rachel Reeves has also been talking this morning about her justification for building a third runway at Heathrow, even though she last decided to disapprove of building an extra runway at Leeds Bradford Airport in 2020. And apparently she didn't like the expansion plans for Leeds Bradford Airport in 2020 because of COVID, because she said nobody was flying anywhere. Huh? Lots of people were flying during COVID, actually. Let's talk to Ross Clark. He's got a column in The Sun today. Labour is in a hole. They'll get growth only by slaying a few sacred cows, starting with net zero. Well, I wish it could be true. Ross, good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
If only they could slash the sacred cow that is net zero. We've been deciding here that Ed Miliband is sort of on the missing list. So we've decided to start a kind of Ed watch for people to determine where he is. If anybody spots him, we're going to be asking them to call us and tell us what he's up to, whether he's eating a bacon sandwich or being closely followed by his personal photographer. But we'll keep you updated on that as to what he's doing. He wasn't around yesterday, apparently, to have his 2 pennies worth on the expansion of Heathrow.
Yes, I expect he's onto vegan bacon sandwiches now. But yeah, it seems that Starmer and Reeves have finally come round to realising that if you're going to preach growth, you actually have to have some policies that actually promote growth. And I mean, some of what was announced yesterday was good, reforming welfare benefits to sort of try to slow down this enormous growth of people on sickness benefits and so on. And we need more runways as well. We need sort of airports because people want to fly and we want to be plugged into the global economy. But I mean, the trouble is that Reeves' sort of idea of a third Heathrow runway is just going to be crushed by the government's net zero targets. It's simply not sustainable with a target of eliminating all carbon emissions by 2050.
Right. Well, she seems to think, and I've seen her talk about this, that it won't be a problem for the net zero targets because they're going to be delivering biofuel, which means that and the extra planes that are going to be put up into the sky won't be polluting the air as much. And also, they might use the odd electric plane. And also, as we all know, because that will reduce the numbers of planes flying around in circles above London, the air will actually be cleaner. But all of that is literally pie in the sky, rubbish.
Well, it is. I mean, her great idea of, well, firstly, electric planes. The sort of trouble is the energy to weight density of batteries is not even nearly enough to power the sort of planes we have at the moment flying across the Atlantic. I mean, I did the calculations myself, and if you tried to stuff a Boeing 777 with enough batteries to get it across the Atlantic, it would weigh as much as the Eiffel Tower. And, of course, it wouldn't get off the ground. Right. As for sustainable airline fuel, well, I mean, that has begun to be used, being mixed in with kerosene, traditional jet fuel. But I mean, absolutely nobody thinks we're going to have a sort of 100% sustainable aviation fuel within the sort of time frame that Rachel Reeves would need it. And the problem is that the sort of cheap end of sustainable aviation fuel is sort of used vegetable oil, but there simply aren't enough chip shops in the world to power our airline fleet. So you have to then go to
the terrible smell. I was once on a boat in Mexico that appeared to be powered by chip oil, and it literally was like a mobile chip shop. It stank to the high heavens.
Yeah, yes. Although, I mean, about 20 years ago, if you remember, sort of enterprising motorists in South Wales started sort of powering their diesel engines with used chip oil.
Yeah.
And nowadays they would be considered environmental heroes. Of course, at the time they were prosecuted for evading fuel duty.
Exactly right. Well, not everybody agrees, of course, that that was a terrible, terrible speech that she made, because we've got Chief Secretary of the Treasury here, Darren Jones, quizzed by Harry Cole on Nevermind the ballots yesterday. Harry basically made the case that this was a pretty desperate speech by Rachel Reeves.
You've increased taxes, you've pushed borrowings to the absolute limit, you've destroyed business confidence, you killed growth. This is all panic, isn't it? This is a good case to sack the Chancellor.
Oh, complete rubbish. Come on, look, you saw today a strong Chancellor in control of the agenda for this country.
Really? Or a panicking Chancellor pivoting and trying to U-turn?
Panicking. You're creating a fiction, Harry.
Would you like the job if she...
It was a great speech today, setting out this government's agenda, why the plan for change is working, the plan for change that the British people voted for, with a historic landside for a Labour government. We're getting on with the job of the change that we promised in delivering, and that is a great thing for the country.
Yes. Well, you may say that. I couldn't possibly comment. Well, I could possibly comment, but, you know, apart from the fact that it isn't going to happen, and growth isn't generally... I mean, I know you said that, you know, if it was to happen, it would generate growth. All I would see, if there was any work being done at Heathrow, would be that they would basically turn that whole area of London into a car park, because nobody would be able to go anywhere. You know, they'd have to make the M25 go underground. They'd have to rebuild all of the train services. You know, the airport itself would be hidebound in you know, dust and you know, construction workers and all the rest of it. It would just be a disaster, because we can't do things like this.
Well, I mean, other countries can do them, but I mean, yeah, there's simply no point in sort of announcing new infrastructure projects until you can tackle this problem of why they cost so much in Britain and so much more than in other countries. And I mean, the variety of reasons for that, and you know, bat tunnels and sort of exceeding environmental rules are one of the reasons, but there are others as well. And one of the things, and another thing which Rachel Reeves didn't mention yesterday, which she absolutely got to, I mean, she mentioned productivity, by the way, but of course she didn't mention the fact that she'd awarded fat pay rises to public sector workers last summer without asking anything in return, without asking them to adopt improved working practices. If you're going to do that, you're going to sort of bake this, you know, lamentable lack of productivity growth into the economy for years to come. And look at the public services now. The ONS productivity figures show that the average worker in the public services is now producing less per hour than they were 28 years ago when Blair came to power. I mean, that's completely ridiculous, given that, you know, all the technological improvements in the meantime. But it's, you know, it's a function of the sort of civil service and so on. So really just turn the civil service into one big job club.
Well, I think there's no coincidence.
Of the workers.
I think there's no coincidence that as the state has grown bigger and bigger and bigger under the last several governments, and I include all the way back to Tony Blair in that, when suddenly they decided to invent a load of special advisors who never existed before, and various different sort of specialists who now work in every department of state, that productivity has gone down. Because we don't really make anything anymore, do we? I mean, the fact that we then had COVID, I mean, I don't know if it's true that there's been no growth in this country for years and years and years and years, but the fact is you can't really create growth out of just public spending, can you?
No, I mean, there are some people on the left who seem to think that only the government can generate economic growth, which of course, is piffle. I mean, if you want economic growth, all you've got to do is transfer resources from the sort of stagnant public sector to much more dynamic private sector, which has been increasing productivity. But of course, you know, what Labour have been doing and what the Conservatives in their later years have been doing is doing the opposite.
Right.
Now, David Cameron and George Osborne actually did make a good start. In between 2010 and 2015, they did cut the number of civil servants.
Yeah.
They did shrink the state a bit, but then they sort of let their foot off the gas, and the sort of charges of austerity seemed to get to the Conservatives, and they reversed the policy. And then come the sort of Brexit, come COVID, they sort of whacked up the number of civil servants, and it's never been shrunk since.
No.
So,
and that is the problem, as I say.
Bloated.
Yeah. So and also because of her earlier policies from July, since the Labour government have been in, you know, growth has been deliberately denuded in this country because they've basically put the mockers on anybody who makes any money. They've encouraged people not to make any more money because they're going to start charging them ever more tax, and when come April there'll be even less incentive to make any money because you just have to give it all back to them.
Yeah, well, the national insurance, employers' national insurance rise is an absolute killer. In particular, the way she's reduced the threshold at which employers become liable to pay national insurance contributions. I mean, it was of 9,200. You could employ somebody on £9,200 a year and not pay employers' national insurance. Now, that's come down to £5,000. Which has effectively increased the cost of employing somebody, a part-time worker, by £600 a year. And, you know, we've had supermarkets, retailers, we've had hospitality venues. They have all been warning for months that since the budget that it is going to cost jobs, it is going to close businesses. And we've now started to see that with Sainsbury's, for example, cutting 3,000 jobs, closing their patisserie counters and pizza counters and so on, and that's going to carry on all through this year as business tries to struggle with a huge extra wage bill that
well, that's it. Lloyd's Bank, rather unhelpfully, decided to announce plans to axe 136 branches just a day after their boss met Keir Starmer at a city summit on reviving the economy. So I mean, I think he's sort of taking the mickey out of him, isn't he?
Yeah, and Santander threatening to leave the country altogether. Right. I mean, you know, these are the sort of big businesses. But, you know, Labour has traditionally been sort of relatively good with big business because it's, you know, the big businesses who get invited on the prawn cocktail circuit and so on, and they ignore the the needs of small businesses. But this time, you know, they seem to be ignoring the big businesses as well. So,
it is extraordinary.
Looking very grim for
It really is weird, isn't it? Lisa in Birmingham has got some help for us on Ed Miliband. She says Ed Miliband has been spotted auditioning for Britain's Got Talent with his ukulele singing Blowing in the Wind. Let's have a look.
The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. So here I am, on the latest stage of my GB Energy Tour, and I'm near Mansfield at the Lyndhurst Wind Farm. Now, these turbines behind me provide power for 5,000 homes.
Nobody mentions Great British Energy anymore, do they? That's kind of fallen below the radar somehow.
Yeah, you know what? I'm pleased it was Timothy Chalamet and not Ed Miliband who got the job for the Bob Dylan film.
Yes.
It wouldn't have been quite so good, would it?
It wouldn't have, no. I don't think I could have sustained 2.5 hours of that. That would have not been a pleasant experience at all.
Yeah, whatever happened to Great British Energy? I mean, this was going to... remember, Miliband was going to reduce our energy bills by £300 a year.
Right.
By this,
don't mention that anymore.
Promise to do decarbonise energy. Well, I mean, electricity prices are already up sort of £150 a year since Labour came to power. If you're a pensioner, you've lost your winter fuel payment, which was worth between £200 and £300 a year. So, I mean, that's costing older people heating their homes. There's absolutely no prospect that Miliband is going to reduce our bills by £300 a year or reduce them by a penny through his target of decarbonisation decarbonising the electricity grid by 2030.
Yeah.
It's going to increase massive costs because he's going to have to... we're all going to have to pay to maintain all these gas power stations to produce power when there's not very much wind and solar. So
Right.
we're going to have to pay for sort of two parallel electricity systems, essentially,
Right.
which are going to be tremendously expensive. And if you think that, Britain already has more wind and solar as a proportion of our electricity than virtually any other major industrial country, well, if wind and solar was so cheap, we'd be saving money already, wouldn't we? But instead, we have the highest electricity prices in the world.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly working, is it?
It's not really, no. And the water bills have just been we've just been told are going to go up by £123 a year in April as well. So it's bad news all round, basically. But Ross, listen, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Ross Clark, columnist at The Sun. Today's column on page 10. Labour's in a hole. They'll get growth only by slaying a few sacred cows, starting with net zero. If only that could happen. Wouldn't that be great? 0344 499 1000. Ed Miliband on the missing list. We'll keep trying to track him down for you. Let's get a voice note from Laura.
Morning, Mike. Laura in Wiltshire. Surely if you're looking for Ed Millipede, we should be looking for Where's the Wally? You could start a competition. Great show.
We could. Where's Wally? Or the Wally? Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely unbelievable, isn't it? Why has he got nothing to say about the big story of the day? Heathrow expansion, a third runway, more air traffic, more pollution, more jet fuel, more people, more traffic, more construction even. I don't see how any of this is in any way green, even if it happens, which it won't. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:41. The sky actually looks pretty clear out there today. The sun appears to be shining in London, so that's a piece of good news as we hedge over to the end of January. It's only another couple of days until the 1st of February. Amazing. Absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? I don't know where January's gone. Can we expect another relaunch, says Graham. Speech next week from Rachel Reeves with her recipe for avoiding financial stagnation. That's Graham in Birmingham. Good morning, says Kevin. Paul in York. I think the new runway will end up like the Tory HS2. And one from Paul in Fife. I listened to Rachel Reeves setting out her strategy for growth, and I found myself thinking that she was actually speaking at a Labour Party conference and addressing an audience of her supporters. At no point did I feel she was speaking to me or indeed the British public at large. And I think that's right. They are all now in their own echo chamber. They're not interested in talking to people that don't agree with them. Rachel Reeves is talking to many people this morning, but she's not talking to us. I wonder why that would be. But let's talk to the people that matter. Jules is in Bedford. Hello, Jules.
Hello, mate. Never been told I mattered before, but that's a lovely start to the conversation.
Well, there you go. You've obviously lived a very sheltered life. Well, carry on. What do you want to tell me?
Yeah, so of course we've been here before. If you remember the financial crisis of 2008,
yeah.
Then we have the coalition government coming in 2010. And what did Cameron and Osborne say? They wanted, remember that phrase, shovel-ready schemes.
Yes.
Where's the shovel-ready schemes? It's certainly not Heathrow runway number 3.
No.
Shovel-ready in 20 years' time if we're lucky.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, the thing that I found astonishing, we should probably play the clip again, actually, of Rachel Reeves saying she's predicting, hopefully, if all this goes well, 0.43% of growth will happen. But she hasn't actually got any idea of what the project will be. She's asking for ideas.
I know. The game was up when she asked the regulators of what we could do to boost growth.
Right.
How about asking business? Number one, scrap the regulators.
Right. Exactly right. Well, you heard what Michael O'Leary had to say. He doesn't have a lot of time for the politicians in the Treasury, that's for sure, because at the end of the day, he said, look, they're putting more taxes on the airline business, and that's the problem. You don't get growth by taxing people. You don't get growth by making, small business pay even more money to the Treasury because they're employing other people.
Yeah, exactly. The balance has gone completely so far the other way now. It's basically had it. Everybody I know who's mobile and ambitious is looking at getting out, basically.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
If you're the last one.
It's quite surprising how many people I know that have left the country. It really is. But listen, great to talk to you, Jules. Thanks very much indeed. Malcolm is in Oxford. Malcolm, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Long time no speak.
Good to talk to you. What can I do for you, sir?
Well, Rachel, I've got no idea. Gives a big speech at Siemens, based in Ensham in Oxford.
Yeah.
And just a mile down the road, at a cost of £51 million, a brand new park and ride system was put in.
Oh, yeah.
£51 million.
How does it cost £51 million?
Because it's a massive park and ride.
All right.
But when they come to open it, they didn't have the money for the access roads.
Excellent.
So there it is. It's sat there. Been sat there a year.
Well, so you can't get to it?
Nobody can use it because they can't get to it.
That's ridiculous.
Right on the A40.
So it's not so much park and ride, it's just park.
You can't park. You can't get your cars there. It's more of a...
Dear me.
Let's have a look.
Right. Is that an Oxford Council project, then?
Yeah, Oxford Kent Council.
Right.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Absolutely unbelievable.
Absolutely.
And these are the people, because I've spoken to a couple of the business owners there in Oxford, who keep shutting roads down and not letting people go in one direction or another direction, cycle paths everywhere, making it difficult for people to get from one part of town to another.
Well, Mike, I'm waiting. I'm at the Nuffield Orthopaedic Hospital, right, for an appointment at 10 o'clock. I live half an hour away. Right. To go by bus would cost me £12.
Right.
£3, 2 buses, £3, £3, then return.
Right.
I had to leave at 7:15 this morning to get here to get a car parking space.
Wow.
For an appointment at 10 o'clock.
Goodness me. And you've had to drive, basically, because it's the only way to get there.
Yeah, because otherwise it was dearer for me to go on the bus because she put the bus up from £2 to £3.
Yeah.
And if you've got to catch 2 buses, that's £6, and then return journey, £12.
Unbelievable.
Ridiculous.
I know.
Ridiculous.
It is, and that's why there's no growth in this country, because people are being taxed up the wazoo. Good to talk to you, Malcolm in Oxford there. How about this from Chris in Newbury? Mike, Rachel wants to build a new runway at Heathrow, so in 20 years she can proudly stand in front of the Rachel Reeves terminal. Instead of that, just being the description of her career prospects. Exactly right. And one from Reg, who says, this morning, Mike, legendary as always, the railway line between Oxford and Milton Keynes and then going on to Cambridge has been a project that's been going on for almost 10 years. The Oxford to Milton Keynes stretch is virtually finished. I don't know where Rachel Reeves is taking the credit for that from. Well, that's a good point as well. Let's talk to Roger in West Sussex. Hello, Roger.
Yeah, hi, Mike.
Good morning. What can I do for you?
Yeah, I'm just interested in this Heathrow facade that we came out yesterday. I've been monitoring for years the fact that we've got Manston Airport down in Canterbury, which is close to the M20, close to the M26, close to Ramsgate, Dover and Folkestone docks. It's a huge airfield. There was an RAF wartime airfield.
Yes. Isn't that where they use? Isn't that where they put lorries if they get backed up on the M20?
It is.
Yeah.
And the Conservatives gave it permission last year for it to be reopened as a cargo hub.
Okay.
It sat there still doing nothing.
Right.
They could move the cargo out of Stansted, out of Heathrow, out of Gatwick, and relieve it as a short-term fix. It's sitting there. We're never going to wait 15 years for another runway at Heathrow if it ever gets there.
That's a great idea.
When this facility is sitting there.
Yeah.
And it's the biggest, I think it's 9th largest airstrip in Europe.
Right.
It was built so you could take off 3 Lancaster bombers at the same time, side by side. That's how big it is.
Wow. And it's such a great idea just to use something we've already got. I mean, why do the people in government not know any of this stuff?
Well, they don't.
I find it extraordinary.
Yeah, I do. Sit here frustrated as hell, thinking that every time we see something on the television, you think, why do they know this? Why do they know that? Have they been on a different planet for the last 20 years?
It's literally like they never leave Westminster and the village, and they don't want to go outside of it because they don't feel like they can be comfortable there. Somebody might shout at them or boo them or something. Unbelievable. Roger, what a great idea. Yeah, brilliant idea. We've already got a runway, a huge runway down there, RAF Manston, I think it was, which is down by Kent, not far from Canterbury. It's been used before as a kind of parking lot for trucks when there's problems with the border going across to the Channel crossings and all the rest of it. And it's ready-made, it's custom-made. You don't have to do anything to it. Move the cargo there, free up loads and loads of runway space at Heathrow. Job done. Abracadabra. I mean, you can actually do it that way. For heaven's sake. Christine has got a voice note for us on missing Ed Miliband.
Good morning, Mike. If you're looking for Mr. Miliband, I think he's just been spotted in the White House trying to convince Donald Trump that net zero is absolutely vital. Good luck with that.
Yes. He doesn't mind the Chinese not being quite on board, though, with it, does he? Maybe you should speak to his good mate Peter Mandelson. Because Mandelson, of course, was heard to be rather disparaging of Donald Trump. He once said he was dangerous for the world. He's changed his tune now, though, because he wants to go and work in Washington, D.C. Very nice embassy there. I've been there. Who can blame him? Let's see what he says now.
You know, the president is a nice person. He's a fair-minded person. And that's why I feel quite confident that when, as I say, he does look at my credentials, he'll think, right, I think this guy could work well for both our countries and our special relationship.
He's going to look at your credentials, is he? I see. Let's have a look at Donald Trump, because he's actually now been talking about Colombia taking back migrants. Remember that? They didn't want to take them at first, and now they do.
For the first time in history, we're loading dangerous and illegal aliens into military aircraft and flying them back to the places from which they came. You probably read about Colombia 2 days ago. They said, no, we're not taking them. I said, we're going to take them. You're going to take them. You're going to like it, too. You're going to take them.
Oh, he's great, isn't he? You're going to take it. You're going to like it. Because he said if you don't, we're going to put so many tariffs on you, you won't know which way to turn. Brilliant. Coming up, Henry Bolton's here. He's going to talk to us about border control. We haven't got any. They have. Why can't we? This is Talk.
do you think she didn't ever use the word Jews or Jewish?
Well, I think we know full well, because she wrote that tweet not thinking about the Jews. She wrote that tweet thinking about Muslim voters and thinking about left-wing supporters of the Labour Party. That's what's so sickening about this whole episode. You know, March the 25th is the annual day to remember the transatlantic slave trade. Now, imagine someone putting out a tweet like that and not having the word Africans anywhere in it, right?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:54. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Coming up in the next hour, Harry Cole is going to be here. Mel Stride MP as well, the Shadow Chancellor, with his take on Rachel Reeves' big plan to build a third runway at Heathrow. Graham says America will have a man on Mars before the third runway at Heathrow is operational. And this from Richard Dudley. Is it just me, but whenever I go to the chemist to collect a prescription, I'm the only bugger who pays? Yeah, I'm the only one that does as well. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. How about this from, where is the name? Oh, there isn't a name. The new Heathrow runway is a red herring. It's diverting attention away from the day job. Labour need to get on with managing more houses, not to mention more roads, more gas, electricity production, more water supplies, more police, more everything. Well, exactly. The only thing we seem to be getting more of are the bleeding migrants, who we now found out this morning. Not only are we paying for them to be put up in hotels, not only are we giving them phones, not only are we giving them food and shelter and accommodation and a credit card and some cash just in case they need it. Turns out we're also giving them some clothes. 4 million quid we've spent on giving them all brand new clothes when they arrive, because guess what? Having been on a dinghy for a while, a few hours, they're a bit wet. Well, so what? Put them in a room, let them dry off. What's going on? Henry Bolton's here, International Border Control expert. Henry, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I mean, this is beggars belief, isn't it? I mean, just when you thought it couldn't get any more ridiculous, it turns out we're now clothing these people.
Yeah, actually, Mike, this isn't really a terribly new story. We've known that when they've arrived at Dover, they've been given food, they've been given hot drinks, they've been given clothing.
Yeah. I thought they got a blanket. I thought they got a blanket. I didn't think they got clothes.
Yeah, well, they've been getting clothes for a long time now, and of course there's a cost associated with that. Now I'm gonna give the sort of the other side of the story for a moment, because of course if these people, and they're cold, and often more recently, particularly the more recent months this or the end of 2024, they've been crossing in much more inclement weather than they have done on any other year. So they are coming over quite often wet and cold. Yeah. And of course, if you don't deal with that, then they're going to get ill, they're going to get hypothermia, they're going to die. So that has to be done. And actually, the cost per migrant works out at just under 36 quid each. So it's in the scale. It's £4 million over 3 years, which is a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah, but it's the principle of it, though. It seems to me,
that's
Henry.
the point.
I was saying earlier to Emma Wolf, I think who was here. You go to Thorpe Park, right? There's a sort of log flume water ride that you go on. You come off it, you're soaking wet because the water splashes up on you, and then you stand in this big dryer thing and you switch it on, and in 2 minutes you're dry. Why can't you just have one of those set up?
Yeah, look, the problem with all of this, Mike, is everything has been ad hoc. Everything's been an emergency measure. The government, the Home Office, the Border Force, all of these different agencies just have not got ahead of the game. We've known that nothing is going to switch these boats off overnight. So they needed to put the infrastructure in place, and they failed utterly to do that. But, you know, the bigger picture really is one of immense cost. I mean, we're talking billions and billions of pounds, in which this 4 million is a small drop in the ocean. Right. And what we've got to do if we want to solve, even if we put these people in a detention camp, we're going to have to pay for that. We're going to have to clothe them. We're going to have to provide laundry facilities. It's all going to cost. So the only answer to this, Mike, as I've been saying for years, is to stop the flow of boats. Now, yes, we've got to deal with the people who are here now and the people who come in the meantime, but we've got to stop that flow of boats, because otherwise we're going to continue forking out on whatever it might be, even transport costs, to get them from Dover to wherever they've got to go.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, but the fact is that nobody has yet come up with a plan to stop them. Donald Trump has been in for a week, and he's already flying thousands of illegal migrants back home to the countries they came from. And for those who are too dangerous to fly back home, he's putting them in Guantanamo Bay, 30,000 of them.
Indeed. And look, Mike, you might or might not know, I've joined the STP recently.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and one of the reasons is because they, unlike Reform, I mean, you know, I'm not being party political here, but the problem with Reform, and I've said it, and others, is that all the other parties are fag paper thin on their policies. It's very attractive to say, we'll put the Navy in the Channel, we'll do this, we'll do that. Right, but when reality hits the road, it's not going to work like that. Now, one of the SDP policies, and I'm feeding into all of that as well, one of the SDP policies is to put these people, ship them directly. Okay, check, quick welfare and health check, then you ship them. If you can't return them immediately, then you ship them to Ascension.
Yeah.
And in Helmand, we built a huge, great
That sounds like a very good plan. Listen, I've got to run. We'll have to talk some more about it another time, Henry, because we're out of time. But thank you. That's a great idea. We'll move into Ascension Island. But, of course, the last time somebody suggested that, the RAF said they wouldn't take them. Ridiculously. This is Talk. I'm Mike Graham. Coming up, Mel Stride and, of course, Harry Cole.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on far ball, slides it in. An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Gray with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, the final hour of the show. The sun is shining, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, so there is some good news out there on the horizon. We've got latest news coming in still from Washington, D.C. On that terrible accident out there where 64 people on an American Airlines plane are now the subject of a search and rescue operation. 19 bodies have been recovered from the Potomac River just outside of Reagan National Airport, I should say, in Washington, D.C. It appears an American Airlines plane collided with a Black Hawk helicopter, which had 3 people from the Army on it. Collided just as it was coming into land. You can see the footage of that happening right now. To Reagan National, coming in from Wichita, Kansas. A terrible, terrible accident. Here's how Fox News broke the story.
As you just mentioned, Jim, a source does confirm to me that there was a tragic mid-air collision around 9 p.m. that happened over the Potomac River involving an American airline commercial flight 5342 from Wichita, Kansas, trying to land here at DCA that crashed with the Black Hawk helicopter. As you just mentioned, Jim, now we have clarification whether it was military, government, or law enforcement. You just said the AP put out an alert saying that it was Army. And a source does tell me there are expected to be around 60 individuals currently unaccounted for, and authorities fear that there may not be too many survivors.
Yeah, it's a tragic story. We'll keep you updated with that as the breaking news comes in. Of course, it happened around about 9 p.m. last night, local time, which is about 2 a.m. in the morning here. We broke the news just as we came on the air at 6 a.m. Coming up, Mel Strider's going to be here, Shadow Chancellor, of course. We'll get his take on Rachel Reeves and her big plan to bring growth back to the British economy by what? Building a railway line between where? Oxford and Cambridge. OK. And what else? Apparently a third runway at Heathrow. Really? Why? Well, apparently that's going to be good for growth. Well, when are we going to see this third runway? 2050. That's 25 years from now. God help us. 0344 499 1000. We're also looking for Ed Miliband. If you happen to see him anywhere, do let us know. He's on the missing list. He doesn't seem to be very sure what he believes anymore, because, of course, Rachel Reeves says she wants growth. He says he wants net zero. And they can't have both, can they? 0344 499 1000. Should we get a voice note from Chris?
On the Heathrow runway, we all know it's going to be a white elephant like HS2. The budget's going to spiral out of control, it'll get delayed, and by 2050 it's probably going to be obsolete anyway. I mean, we're the country who built the fantastic Harrier jump jet, and we've got Musk in America who can send a rocket to space and land it back on a sixpence. Why can't we develop a commercial aircraft that doesn't need a runway?
Well, there's a thought. How about that? An aircraft that doesn't need a runway. I mean, well, we had those fighter jets, didn't we? Those Harrier jump jets. They could do that. You couldn't get many people on it, though. This one as well, from Jazz, who says there's a completed airport in Doncaster which was closed a few years ago. What's wrong with reopening that one? Good question. We'll answer all of those questions coming up right here on Morning Glory. Let's get a first look as well at what Donald Trump is doing. You know, we learned this morning, as we were just talking to Henry Bolton there, that not only are we giving migrants hotel rooms and putting them up for months and months on end until we can find them a house, we're now giving them clothes when they arrive. Here's what Donald Trump's doing when he finds himself on the receiving end of some illegal migrants.
I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo.
Guantanamo Bay, I mean, the name puts fear into everybody, never mind just actually going there. Nearly Stokes said, if this extra runway ever gets started, who's going to build it? Will it be the highly skilled dinghy travellers, or will they have to rely on our own far-right working people? Very good. And one from Julia in Mansfield. She says, Mike, I've just been out looking for Mad Ed Miliband. He's not in that field doing an encore in front of the windmills. The location is just a couple of 100 metres from my house. Blimey, that's surprising, isn't it? And then perhaps one of my favourite ones of the day, one from, where is it? It doesn't have a name. What is wrong with you? The best thing for this country is for Siliband to get lost. Don't try and find him. Well, if you're looking for him and you do see him, do let us know, please, because he is definitely on the missing list. Let's talk to John, who's in York. Hello, John.
Hello, mate.
How are you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm all right, thank you very much.
Good man. What can I do for you?
Right, do you remember a funny little weird blonde bloke called Boris?
I do.
Right, he had a little theory about a thing called Boris Island a few years ago.
That's right, I remember that. Yeah, the airport in the Thames estuary.
Right, basically, it ticks all the boxes. I used to live there.
Right.
You've got a concrete pad.
Right.
You've got oil storage tanks. You've got railway.
Yeah.
You've got road. You've got river. You've got a port. You can even do the environmental thing and have tidal energy. It's 2 + 2 makes 4 all day long.
Absolutely. And why didn't it go ahead? Because environmentalists said they didn't want it.
Well, there's a bit of a ship out there called the Montgomery as well, which doesn't help. But, do you know, technology nowadays, mate, I'm sure they can sort it all out.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Honestly, why waste money on another airport or another runway at Heathrow? All that hassle, all that confusion, all that time taken up for nothing when you've got everything there.
Yeah.
Even here, where I live now, you've got the Doncaster.
Yeah, exactly. That's Robin Hood, isn't it? The Robin Hood Airport. Yeah, very good point. John, thank you very much indeed. This is the thing. There's so many good ideas coming in already just from people who watch this show, who listen to this show, the valuable talk listeners, very splendid and smart people. Let's talk to Mel Stride, Shadow Chancellor, find out what he makes of it all. Mel, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Very beautiful day down there. It's nice to see the sun shining, but the sun's not shining.
Well, it is. I start.
Go on.
No, I was going to say, when I started, it was from this very spot with another channel, and it was pitch black. And you're my last interview.
Excellent. Well,
but I'm delighted to have my last interview with you.
We save the best for last, Mel. That's what we do. If only the sun was shining on number 11 Downing Street, the Chancellor of the Exchequer's office, which I fear it may not be this morning, because we're finding out that not only does this plan of hers to build a third runway at Heathrow face all sorts of opposition, including from Sadiq Khan, who's meant to be on her side, but if it is built, it's not going to happen for about 25 years.
Well, this is the problem, Mike. So, look, we've got an immediate problem right now, which is low growth, unemployment rising, the government having whacked up taxes on businesses up and down the country, a lot of people struggling as a consequence of the choices that this government made at the budget. And announcing things much, much further down the line, as you say with Heathrow, there'll be decades in the future, is good because we should be thinking about those things, absolutely. But they're not actually addressing the fundamental issue, which is what's going to happen this year, next year, the year after, over the next few years, with people's living standards, the economy, jobs. Now, Rachel Reeves had only just sat down when Tesco announced hundreds of jobs losses, and that's joining the other major supermarkets with the same. And Lloyd's announced 136 high street bank branch closures almost immediately after she sat down. That's what's happening in the real world at the moment.
Yeah, and that is the problem as well, because I've already been given a couple of options this morning just from our very, very well-informed listeners. RAF Manston, for example, is a place down in Kent, near Canterbury, often used now for a sort of car park for lorries, or a lorry park for lorries whenever there's a problem with crossing the channel because the French are on strike again. But it's a massive runway. It could be used, as somebody pointed out, for all the cargo. You could direct all the cargo from Heathrow to it, which would increase the capacity for, you know, commercial flights to go in and out of Heathrow. I mean, my worry is that if you try and turn Heathrow into an even bigger site than it is now, there'll be chaos. The roads will be an absolute quagmire. You won't be able to get around the M25. You know, you'll have to knock down a load of houses to build another runway. You know, the whole idea, which has been knocking around for 22 years, is a nonsense, isn't it?
Well, I think we have to accept, Mike, that there is a need now for increased air capacity in the UK, and that Heathrow is unique in being a hub airport and uniquely important in that sense. But what you're absolutely right about is that this has to be a process, and we have to look very closely at the issues you've raised, including noise, pollution, congestion, particularly with the M25 and M4 and so on and so forth. But I think what is interesting at the moment is that, you know, even Sadiq Khan is now threatening legal action against the policy of this government. So Labour really need to sort of get their act together and get a united front on this if they have any chance, even in the longer term, of delivering on this.
Yeah, exactly right. But also, as you say, business confidence in this country is at an all-time low. We've got small businesses talking about not investing anything in the near future because they simply don't have the money, given the national insurance hike that's coming in April. We've got foreign investment at an all-time low. We've got millionaires leaving the country at a rate of knots. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to in the last week who are actually leaving the country, you know, and yet they seem to be sort of focusing on this one thing as if that's going to fix it all, but it won't.
Well, that is the fundamental issue, that it's important to talk about the long term, absolutely. It's important to talk about big infrastructure projects, absolutely right. But that is ducking the key issue here, which is the one that you've raised, which is that right now, businesses up and down the country are not hiring people when they otherwise would have done. They're laying people off as a direct consequence of the decisions that Rachel Reeves took in the budget of putting up taxes. We've got this employment rights bill as well, which there have been estimates that could cost businesses £5 billion. You know, I mean, what is this government doing? And what we've got to have is Rachel Reeves now getting serious about this, coming to the House of Commons on the 26th of March when she'll deliver her spring statement and explaining to us, fine, we've got all these ideas and announcements about infrastructure in decades to come, but what is the plan to get the economy growing over the next few years? And that's what's missing.
And is it fair to say, as people have been saying this morning, that we haven't had any growth in this country for years? If that is true, what did the Conservatives do about it?
Well, actually, our inheritance, Mike, was that when this government took over, we had the fastest growing economy in the G7.
Right.
We had a near record level of employment. We had near record low unemployment. You know, we had real wages that have been growing for 13 consecutive months, and we brought inflation down from over 11% because of the Ukraine war down to bang on its target of 2% on the day of the general election. Now, that is the inheritance that this government in 6 short months has completely trashed.
No, indeed. That's what I thought. That's why I was wondering why people were saying it. Mel, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor. Let's hear from Liam on missing Ed Miliband.
Morning, Mike. Liam from Kent. I know where Ed Miliband is. Maybe someone in the Labour Party's had a bit of common sense and strapped him to a wind turbine somewhere and maybe has just left him there. Great show as always, mate. All the best.
Yeah, you just go round and round and round like that, you know, like very slowly. And we're very delighted to see Harry Cole here. Very good morning to you.
In the
How
flesh.
nice to see you. Welcome.
Normally do Zoom.
We do.
What a treat this is.
I know, isn't it lovely? What a beautiful day for it as well.
I was just thinking that. It's stunning, isn't it?
Now, your newspaper, The Sun, has been quite sort of complimentary about Rachel Reeves this morning, the leader column. I come to say I don't entirely agree with them. I don't know that this is going to work. I don't think it's...
That's why we're here, Mike.
Yeah,
you know, we didn't agree to disagree.
Indeed. I don't think that one, it will ever happen. We've already had 22 years of talking about getting Heathrow third runway. I don't think it's necessary. And if it does come, it won't come for another 25 years.
I am inclined to agree with you on all of that. I mean, look, when the government does things we agree with and we like, we say so.
Right.
But now it's the feet to the fire moment, isn't it? Now you've got to do this.
Yeah.
All of the things she said yesterday, great, crack on, brilliant, love it, do it. But if this stuff was easy, it would have been done by the last Labour government 15 years ago.
Right.
None of this stuff is hard, and I think the crucial thing the government have got to realise is that they haven't now won the battle.
Right.
They haven't won the battle on planning. They haven't won the battle on growth. This is now the sort of start of the conversation, and now they've actually got to see this through. So, look, great speech, good stuff. Whatever.
Right.
Do we believe it? You're sceptical.
That's the
I'm
problem.
sceptical.
Because they say...
Now we've got to hold their feet to the fire and make sure they actually deliver.
Exactly, because they say they're going to do a lot of things, and they've been saying they've been going to do a lot of things since July.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things they haven't really done.
I agree. Look, I think the government has been in a bit of a mess. We have talked until the cows come home about that. I think this is look, if they have now realised they have cocked it up so far, and they're now changing the narrative, changing the tone, changing the positivity, changing the whole attitude to the country. They spent 6 months basically talking down Britain.
Yes.
If they realise now that they have cocked that up and essentially talked us almost to the brink of a recession, look, never too late. Look, God loves a repenter, right?
But maybe it is too late because it's going to get worse, isn't it? Because April's coming, it's looming on the horizon. It's going to be February in a couple of days' time. Soon we're going to be in April. People that tell me who run the small businesses that they're going to be crippled financially by the minimum wage going up and by the national insurance increase.
I think also we sort of, to use a horrible Westminster term, we sort of priced in the national insurance thing. Look, businesses need to plan for the year ahead and 2 years ahead and 5 years ahead, sure, but this hasn't actually kicked in yet.
Exactly.
It doesn't come in until April. And I cited yesterday on my show, I cited a small business owner who was, I basically said, look, he's a friend of mine, and he called me last night because I sent him the clip, and he said, well, yeah, you got this right, which is essentially, I am now trying to stand still. I'm now basically treading water rather than expanding. But exactly the point you made is it's going to get worse, and it actually sort of, reality hasn't quite kicked in yet. And if you think, the government has shot business confidence and footfall and sort of hiring to a standstill before the actual money's even left their bank accounts.
Exactly.
So I do think there's something there, but on the speech and on the sort of change in tone and on the change of direction, look, if they actually do it, it should be welcomed. But our job is now to make sure they actually do it. Yeah.
Well, I've got a clip here from Never Mind the Ballots, which is
what a show, Mike! What a show! You must come on one day.
I should do that. Really,
we could do like a sort of return the favour thing.
We could absolutely
get Jeremy Kyle along.
Kyle, yeah, well, we
call it Clash of the Titans or something.
Yeah, we could call it something like that. You couldn't make Clash of the Titans yesterday. His train was late.
Oh no!
Darren Jones, Chief Secretary of the Treasury, who's effectively the sort of Deputy Chancellor, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, a very smooth, silky man.
He is a very smooth, silky man. He's also a vegan, though, which slightly troubles me.
He didn't tell me that before he came
slightly troubles me.
He did not tell me that.
Anyway, you weren't that nice to him, though. Let's have a look.
I'm always nice.
You've increased taxes, you've pushed borrowings to the absolute limit, you've destroyed business confidence, you killed growth. This is all panic, isn't it? This is a good case to sack the Chancellor.
Oh, complete rubbish. Come on, look, you saw today a strong Chancellor in control of the agenda for this country.
Really? Or a panicking Chancellor pivoting and trying to U-turn?
Panicking. You're creating a fiction, Harry.
Would you like the job if she...
It was a great speech today, setting out this government's agenda, why the plan for change is working. The plan for change that the British people voted for, with a historic landslide for a Labour government. We're getting on with the job of the change that we promised in delivering, and that is a great thing for the country.
He's actually better than her, isn't he? In a way. I mean, I don't mean to be unkind.
Notice he didn't answer the question of whether
he didn't answer the question, but he didn't mind you giving him a bit of a shellacking there either, which is what they should put up with. They should expect to get that.
Yeah, of course. Also, he's got a really interesting job in the next 3 or 4 months, which is this massive spending review.
Right.
And they've maxed out borrowing. They've maxed out the tax rising potential. We hope.
Yeah.
I mean, really, we have record levels of taxes.
Can they find any more things to tax?
I'm sure they could, but I do realise, I think politically they know that tax is toxic to them. So they've got to start cutting some spending, and that's his job, which is Chief Secretary of the Treasury. He's basically essentially bad cop.
Yeah. But so everybody tries to cut spending, and not very many times does it work.
Exactly. I mean, the Tories identified £12 billion of welfare cuts. I suspect that's probably a bit toppy in politically what's possible. And what I asked him at the end there is he's going to be probably the most unpopular man in Britain shortly.
Right.
Certainly in the shadow cabinet, because he's got to turn around and tell everyone there's no money and you've got to start really scrimping. But also the Labour Party has got all these new MPs, nice, young, pretty, fun people who've never really been tested.
Yeah.
And there's about to be a massive crunch for them because they've got to cut the welfare bill.
Yeah.
There's no more money for the NHS. The NHS yesterday turned up in Parliament and said, oh, you know that 10.6 billion you gave us last month? It's gone.
Yeah.
And so they're going to come back with their begging bowl and they're going to have to be told no. At the same time as...
Because the welfare budget's massively up, isn't it?
It is insane. It is hugely... it is out of control. And, we used to be a health service with a country attached.
Yeah.
Now we're a health service and a welfare society with a country attached. There's no money.
Right.
At the same time as they need to find 2.5% of GDP for defence.
Right.
So that guy, Darren Jones, very silky, very smooth, very charming.
Yeah.
But he's about to have a real test of his life because they've got to cut the welfare bill. And do they have the political capital to do it? No, I don't think they do. They may have the political will to do it, but they're going to have a massive fight with their own side about this.
Yeah.
And so, it will make Heathrow and Sadiq Khan tweeting about, Heathrow look like a walk in the park.
I bet.
They're about to the Labour Party is about to have a massive internal sort of battle for itself.
Right. Interesting, because we always said that they would probably be the opposition to the government.
Well, it's always the way. I mean, the majority of that size, essentially, the Tories are barely on the pitch. You know, Nigel's, he's doing Nigel, but he's only got 5 MPs. Yeah. The real sort of decision making, exactly what happened with the Tories under Boris, is actually, and when the opposition were a bit useless, the sort of battles become internally, and there's 400 of these Labour MPs. Yeah. I nearly said something rude there.
I can see it.
I can see Christian. Christian's going to have to dump me again.
I can see it. Now, let me get your view on this. This is a great voice note that we got a little bit earlier.
I love your voice notes, by the way.
Yeah, these are brilliant.
Your voice notes are supreme.
They're incredible. This is Mark on what he believes the Labour government to be.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. These days, every time I hear one of these Labour Party government clowns speaking, I keep waiting for them to say Shazam at the end of a sentence or abracadabra. They seem to think that they can influence the direction of travel on the big issues just by saying things. You can tell that when they're interviewed. What we're saying on this is, what we're saying on that is. They say lots, but they don't actually do anything. And this is what Rachel from customer service is trying to do now. She's trying to influence the economy just by saying things. There'll be a third runway, Shazam.
It's true, isn't it? I mean, it does have that sound to it. It's like they expect something to just happen magically in front of our very eyes.
I mean, one of the biggest things the government, I mean, I'm about to get all philosophical now, but vibes are really important.
They are.
Because one of the biggest tools in the arsenal of the government is that you are the government. And when you say something, you can move markets. Yeah. You can move, sort of opinion. You can move, you can unblock sort of, different bits of the system. Yeah. And I think what the Labour government have realised is actually they've only now just realising that how important actually what they say is. Because when they came into power, obviously they were playing a nice little, quite cute political game in they're having their massive revenge on 2010 when George Osborne and David Cameron did a very effective, because it was correct, view that basically Gordon Brown didn't necessarily cause the economic crash, but when the economic crash came, he hadn't fixed the roof and the sun was shining and he was massively overexposed and we were in the worst possible situation to face that crisis. They made a really, really good fist of that. And Labour have been steaming about that for 15 years, 14 years. And so when they came in, they're like, right, we're going to get our revenge. We're going to trash the Tories. The Tory brand was trashed already. That's why they won the election. Exactly. And they just kept on punching. The guy was on the floor and they just kept on punching him. And actually, what they didn't realise is that you're now the Chancellor, you're now the Prime Minister, and when you say the country is in the toilet, those words mean something. Yeah, right. And investors went, oh, you know what? Well, the Chancellor's saying the country's... I'm going to swear again.
It's going to get worse. He did say it, didn't he?
Actually, what the problem was is they trashed the country too far, playing political games. They trashed the country too far. Yeah. They basically... stalled growth.
Yeah.
They stalled footfall. Look at Christmas. There's meant to be this great big surge of people shopping.
There was no retail surge at all.
Exactly. And people were worried because the government had been telling them for 3 months the country was screwed. And now, Rachel Reeves 2.0 reboot, comes back and says,
last week, wasn't it?
And says, exactly, and says, what, everything's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, who do we believe? Do we believe Rachel Reeves 1.0 or do we believe Rachel Reeves 2.0? And I think the problem is they probably may have done some serious damage to the economy.
So. And also a lot of people...
Just with those vibes.
And also a lot of people, when she's telling them it's time to be optimistic, are going, well, we were optimistic, but actually the way things have gone, it's made us much more pessimistic. And so we're not really buying the optimism vibe.
If you tell everyone everything's... I'm going to swear again. If you tell everyone everything's down the Swanee, people...
Up the creek.
Yeah, and it might not even be... it's almost subliminal. Yeah. People don't... are you going to hire that extra person? Yeah. Are you gonna think about buying that new car?
Right.
Or are you gonna maybe install your heat pump?
Right.
Or, exactly. Like, it's just big decisions that suddenly sort of stalled, and that happens at a household level. That happens at a small business level, and as we're seeing. at a big level, it's going the other way because people are getting fired. You know,
absolutely.
Sainsbury's,
people are leaving the country.
Jobs. Tesco's yesterday had a job. 138 banks closed yesterday, and these things, you know, these things have an impact.
Of course they do. Absolutely right. Harry, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
I might come in more often.
Yeah, you should.
This is nice.
It's
like
good.
it.
It's much better face to face, isn't it? You can see the
Monday
whites
morning,
of your eyes.
Monday morning's a bit ropey.
Monday might be difficult. I get that. I mean, but we're near the end of the week. Friday's coming tomorrow. There's an awful lot of businesses on the ropes, and that is what we are talking about this morning. Harry Cole, every Monday, of course, in the Sun, every day as well, right here in the same building as we are. It's 26 minutes past 9. This is Talk.
This is a new opinion poll carried out since the sentencing last Thursday of the Southport killer Axel Rudikabana to a minimum term of 52 years. And that is an increase in support for the death penalty in this country. 55% of Brits now say they would bring back the death penalty in this country.
You see this in the US. It sounds all clear-cut. That's not the way the judicial process works. But I do think what Kemi Badenoch has said is absolutely right, that there should be whole-of-life sentences if you are 17.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham, and this, of course, is the home of common sense. I've got this from James, who says he's stuck in traffic. This whole search for growth by Rachel Reeves is ridiculous, and the whole let's throw as much as we can and see what sticks attitude doesn't work. It's really simple. All she has to do is two things to create growth in our economy. One, cut business tax and corporation tax, steal all the business from Europe, cut business rates for small businesses so we can recreate our high streets, and two, deport the illegal immigrants and close our borders. It's not difficult, is it? Hello, says Marco in Swindon. I remember the good old days when you used to be able to go out to work and provide for your family. These days it seems that we go to work to provide for a migrant family. I'm so happy this Labour government have their priorities straight. I see these people walking around wearing £500 jackets. I wish I could afford one of them. Well, exactly right. You do see people rather well dressed, don't you? You used to wonder, where do they get the money for that? And of course, it turns out we're paying for it. £4 million worth of clothing for illegal migrants when they land at Dover, because they might be a bit cold and wet. Well, that's what happens when you enter a country illegally by dinghy over the water. What do you expect? Wear better clothes, for heaven's sake. Let's talk to Donna Harvey now, the co-presenter of Arizona's Morning News on KTAR in Phoenix, Arizona. We had breaking news this morning. Search and rescue still going on in the Potomac River. American Airlines passenger jet with 60 passengers and 4 crew on board has collided this morning, 2 a.m. our time, 9 p.m. their time. A Black Hawk helicopter collided with them over the Potomac River just as they were approaching Reagan Washington National Airport, just outside of Washington, D.C. And at least 19 bodies so far have been recovered following the crash, but there's feared that there could be as many as 64 passengers and crew on board the American Airlines plane, and 3 members of the Army in the Black Hawk helicopter as well. Donna, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
I mean, it's a terrible story, this. It's hard to imagine how it happened, really. And I know it's way too early to sort of pontificate about that. But a lot of people have asked me this morning, how is it possible that a helicopter like that, a military helicopter, could be as close to a passenger plane in that very, very tight airspace?
Well, that is incredibly tight airspace. So, and a lot of Washington is a no-fly zone. So you know where the airplanes are going to be. The military helicopter is the one at this point that we have questions about. You know, not really sure, again, because it's so early as to what exactly happened. But the chances of the plane being in the wrong place are pretty slim. So, you know, the eyes right now are on the military and that helicopter to find out, you know, why was it there and how did this happen? Because that airspace is so very controlled.
Yeah, exactly right. It's almost inconceivable. You would think that it actually would be an impossibility in some ways, because you'd have the American Airlines plane very much in the control of air traffic control at Reagan National. You would think they would have seen whatever was around them, you know?
Well, I mean, you know, considering the time of night, I mean, you can see less from a cockpit than I think most people can think, or would think. You know, most of your eyesight actually comes from instrumentation.
Right.
So you know, if it looks like they were either taking off or coming in for a landing, that I'm not even sure about.
Yeah, we were told they were on approach to landing, having flown in from Wichita, Kansas.
Right. So if you're on approach, I mean, you are in a very defined airspace and a very defined air corridor doing what you're supposed to be doing. A helicopter coming out of nowhere, I mean, I don't even know how you would take evasive action, honestly.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a shocking story, but as I say, it's a rescue operation now. I don't think they're going to find anybody alive, unfortunately, tragically. Let's talk just a little bit about Donald Trump as well, LaDonna, because there was this amazing story that happened at the weekend where he was deporting a lot of people to Colombia. He was on the 6th hole of a golf course. They refused to accept them. By the time he'd reached the 8th hole, they'd changed their minds. So let's have his explanation of what happened.
For the first time in history, we're loading dangerous and illegal aliens into military aircraft and flying them back to the places from which they came. You probably read about Colombia 2 days ago. They said, no, we're not taking them. I said, we're going to take them. You're going to take them. You're going to like it, too. You're going to take them.
I mean, he's really doing a lot of stuff that people thought he wouldn't be able to do. Certainly, as far as getting rid of some of the illegal migrants, the criminal ones anyway.
Right.
He's now talking about sending some of them to Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah, you know, that's another thing entirely. So the entire brouhaha with Colombia was because Colombia was not actually offended by the conditions on the flight to Colombia. They were offended on the part of somebody else. In some cases, the people who are being deported are being flown on military aircraft. Military aircraft are not terribly comfortable. I don't know if you've ever been on one.
Yes. I sat on a bench once for 7 hours flying over Bosnia.
Right, and that is not fun. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not luxe seating on British Airways by any stretch. You know, however, was anybody harmed? No, it was a flight out. So Colombia decided to dig in its heels, and it didn't last long. When you consider the incredible ability that the president has when it comes to the economy and when it comes to making decisions on, who our trading partners are going to be and what those tariffs are going to be. That's why he keeps mentioning tariffs. When they got into the tariff war, Colombia backed down pretty quickly.
Right.
That we weren't trying to deport anybody to Colombia that didn't come from Colombia.
Right.
Is the thing. These are your citizens that we are just sending back. We're sorry that you don't like that we're sending them back the way that we are. But first class accommodations, alas, were not possible at this time.
Yeah. Absolutely right. LaDonna, we've got to leave it there because we're up against the time clock, I'm afraid, this morning. But thank you very much indeed. LaDonna Harvey, co-presenter of Arizona's Morning News on KTAR in Phoenix, Arizona. We'll bring you more on that terrible accident over the skies of Washington, D.C. When we get more information. Coming up next, though, we're going to speak to Esther McVey, former Minister for Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:39, and this, of course, is the home of common sense. We are here all the way through until 10 o'clock. We are here for 4 glorious hours every single weekday morning, 6 a.m. sharp. All the way through until 10. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here as well. Edward says, are Labour already out of ideas after 6 months? They have to reheat all the old Tory ideas. And Glyn says, from Bolton, on the Heathrow debate, why don't they just update all current airports to international airports and spend on world-leading rail transport links between them all, and then you can land anywhere in the UK? Well, there is that. I mean, I don't think Heathrow's the answer. I really don't. But since we are the home of common sense, we thought, why not get the former Minister for Common Sense on board? Esther McVey is here. Esther, very good morning to you.
Good morning. Great to be here.
Very good.
Common sense.
Very good to see you. Well, this is where you belong. You know, we talk it all the time. Not many people do. We're reading all sorts of stories this morning that just drive you mad. I mean, people say to me every morning, I wasn't going to get angry this morning, but you've done it again. You've wound me up. I mean, this morning we've got the story on the front page of the Telegraph telling us that not only are we giving these migrants that come into our country, you know, a nice hotel room to sleep in, some money to spend, you know, some free food. We're now giving them clothes as well, to the tune of £4 million. I mean, it's insane.
Well, look, we've always been a tolerant country, but when you think You know, you're being taken advantage of.
Yes.
These have landed on our shores illegally. They shouldn't be here. We should be sending them straight back. And that is why I agreed with Rishi's policy of having Rwanda. We need a third country to send them back immediately to, because they've destroyed the passport. You can't send them back to a country if you don't know where they've come from. We need a third country. And I think people are waking up to that now. But I'm afraid for Labour, it's too late, because it was one of the first things they did was get rid of the third country. But that's the only way you can send these people back. But you're right, we shouldn't be making it easier for illegal immigrants to come over.
No, of course not. And as soon as there's a sort of a drive to bring people here, the people smugglers are making an absolute fortune, so they don't need any more incentive than just to keep doing it. But the people are going to keep coming if they know they're going to be well treated. I mean, already we're seeing the effects of Donald Trump's policies in America, where he's flying people back on planes to places like Colombia. He's talking about sending people off to Guantanamo Bay. People are going to stop coming if they think they're going to be treated badly.
Well, that's it. You need to know that this act you have done is illegal. And I can't be any clearer. And we need to make it very clear, like Trump is doing, should you enter our country this way, you will be sent to, and in our case, the third country was Rwanda. And, you know, that is the deterrent, and the message needs to go out far and wide. This is not how you gain entry to this country.
Yeah, exactly right. Let's talk about something else that keeps people awake at night, and that's the NHS. They're hiring diversity staff at a rate of 1 a week, despite orders to cut back on the initiatives. And these are the people who are not in the front line of medicine in any way, shape or form. They're not nurses, they're not doctors. They're just people who should be hired, apparently, in order to fit some kind of ridiculous EDI quota. And again, we've seen Donald Trump just stripping all that away. It can be done. I mean, I'm sorry to say that some of it started under the Tories, but, you know, it's mad, isn't it?
Well, I don't know if you know, when Rishi brought me back into government and I went into the Cabinet Office, it was to get those ED numbers down. Right. And so I did 6 months of work on that and brought through the new guidance, which would stop people being employed solely for this. It would stop and would have to be signed off for ministers for any external contractors doing this. Because what I was looking at is, were we delivering value for money for the taxpayer? Were they getting a good job done? And this was not happening, because we had an industry that was ballooning, which was EDI, taking people away from the job they should be doing to have a sort of an internal never-ending dialogue about sort of ideological matters. We don't want that. And as you look at the public sector and the productivity levels, as you look at the cost going up, and this is where Trump and Musk are looking at it, well, they're looking at it waste within the public sector. So it was waste within the public sector and delivering the job you should be doing. You know, if you're in the NHS, you should be focused on the health of the nation, not holding EDI events.
Exactly right. And did you find that more difficult than you thought it would be, or did you find it easier than you thought it would be to kind of strip away some of that stuff?
No, it was much more difficult, and I'll tell you for why. Where you see these jobs here, that it is somebody employed to do a job, well, you could say, get rid of them immediately, you could see that, but it hadn't. It had absolutely filtrated right through organisations. So then you have to see how many people are doing just a couple of hours a week, a month on this. Then you have to see how many network groups have established. So I was doing the work across Whitehall, so actually getting that information is really rather difficult. Hence, I had to say, anybody who's doing this job, let's move it into human resources so we can actually see what's going on. Let's see the hours, the numbers, etc. of the people. So no, it wasn't easy. And like I said, you've created an industry. You've got a lot of people there doing, I'd call it a non-job, a politically correct job. And so getting rid of that is very complicated, but I'd started the work, Rishi started the work, Jeremy Hunt started the work, and I also think it's different for Trump. He's actually won a mandate to get rid of this. He's just won, and he's just coming straight into office. This was the sort of, I guess it was the end of a parliament, and you had what would be, as I said, an industry, people in there. You had a very left-wing group of people in Labour coming in promising they would keep these roles. And what have they done? Not only have they kept them, they're now expanding them. And I can tell you, this is a massive mistake by Labour.
Yeah. And one of many, I'm afraid. Final word on Rachel Reeves. What do you make of her third runway at Heathrow plan? It seems to fall right flat in the face of what Ed Miliband says he wants to do. Sadiq Khan says he doesn't want it. He's going to bring lawsuits against the government. You know, it's a bonkers idea, isn't it? And it's never going to happen. If it does happen, it will happen in 25 years.
Right, so there's a couple of things there. Do I agree with the third runway? Look, we're an island, we're an international global island, so, expanding our airports, that I don't have a problem with. No, the problem with Rachel Reeves, Toby's actually did a disaster of a budget. You've got businesses saying we cannot pay all this extra tax. So you've got a disaster of a budget as well as a disaster of a new set of rights for workers. And now she is desperately running around trying to find anything that will bail her out of this awful budget. So she's coming up with ideas. I think one of your listeners had said, Gazam or whatever. I will announce something. Gazam, it will happen. This isn't going to happen for years and years. The best thing she could do is say, do you know what? It was a disaster of a budget, particularly employers' national insurance contributions increase. Let's stop that. Let's stop the other disastrous rights and new workers' rights we're bringing in, because that is the only way she's going to start to get growth, and we need that immediately. We need to send out a clear message. We want to support businesses, small businesses, farmers, family businesses, everybody she's got the boot into. Yeah, absolutely right. Couldn't agree more. Esther McVeigh, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Former Minister for Common Sense, now back at the home of Common Sense, of course, because that's where she belongs. Coming up after the break, we're going to speak to the brother-in-law of Omri Miran, who's currently held hostage in Gaza. Moshe Levy is going to join us. Let's get a voice note from Alex.
Hello, Mike. This is Alex from South Wales. Everybody going on about this third runway at Heathrow. Well, what about us in Cardiff? We've got a Cardiff airport, which is basically underused, being bailed out by the Welsh taxpayer. It's got only 4 check-in desks. Nobody can go anywhere. And during the winter, it's just one deserted area. Talk about building airports in the wrong place.
Yeah, I've flown out of Cardiff Airport actually a couple of times. Yeah, it's not very big, but yeah, I mean, it would make more sense to expand places like that, wouldn't it? Because if you live in somewhere like Bristol, you'd rather go to Cardiff. When I went to Cardiff Airport, I was actually living in Wiltshire, and it was actually easier to get to Cardiff Airport and fly out of Cardiff Airport because it was quite a pleasant experience, rather than going all the way to Heathrow and having to get there 3 hours before, so you go through all the check-ins and security and all of that. I'm all in favour of actually, if you want to call it, devolving the airline business and have more local airports where planes can take off from. Because if you're going to Europe or something, you don't need to be on a massive, huge plane that needs a very, very long runway. You just don't. Common sense, you see. It's 9:48.
full-length runway in Britain was built in the 1940s. No progress in 80 years. A third runway could increase potential GDP by 0.43% by 2050.
Could a new runway be built that abides with carbon targets, concerns around noise pollution and concerns around air pollution?
That a third runway at Heathrow would unlock further growth, boost investment, increase exports and make the UK more open and more connected.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah. Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock, about 7 more minutes before Julie Hartley-Brewer comes in. The crime statistics that we talked about a little bit earlier on have officially been released. 9.5 million incidents in the year to September 2024. That's up 12% on last year's survey to September 2023. These are all offences, basically, involving knives or sharp instruments. They increased by 4% to 55,008 offences compared with the year ending September 2023. So crime overall is up 12%. Offences involving knives or sharp instruments up by 4%. Not such a big jump. Let's talk now, though, about what's going on in the Middle East today, because there's been some more hostages released this morning, a couple more to be released this afternoon. There's 5 Thai hostages to come out. But we're going to speak now to Moshe Levy, who is the brother-in-law of Omri Migrant, who's currently held hostage still in Gaza. So far, one hostage, Agam Berger, who's a female soldier in the IDF, has been freed as part of the ceasefire deal today. We look forward to more of those who are still being held being released as well. Omri, a very good morning to you. Moshe, sorry.
It's all right. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Obviously, you would be hopeful that Omri is still alive. It's difficult when you don't know. I presume you don't really know much about the circumstances.
Yes, you're correct. Most of the families don't know exact information about their loved ones. We do get updates with some signals from our officials in Israel, the IDF and the government, but it's never conclusive. We have no reason to believe he's not alive. We've last received a proof of life in late April when Hamas released a psychological warfare video featuring him. And we keep advocating for his release and release of all the hostages.
And are you hopeful that there is going to be some kind of, I mean, this is the third day, I suppose, isn't it, since the ceasefire was announced, that you've got some hostages being released. After this, it enters a kind of a slightly more unknown stage, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think people should not be mistaken. This is not a peace deal or a long-lasting ceasefire between Israel and a terrorist organization. This is a hostage deal, and we look at it as that. We don't trust Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They're not good faith partners for any agreement. No. And so we're cautious. We are welcoming the release of hopefully 3 Israelis today from captivity and 5 Thai citizens. But tomorrow there could be additional roadblocks for the continuation of the agreement.
Yes, and that would appear to be the difficulty, wouldn't it? Because it's so fragile that it could kind of come apart at any point. I mean, it's an incredible and awful ordeal that everybody's been put through, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it's for the hostages who have been held for 482 days today. Terrible situation. Many of them went through torture, abuse, deprived of food, water, sanitation. Some were sexually assaulted. And of course, for us, the families, we try and present a strong appearance when we speak with policymakers, when we speak with the public, and of course with the media. But at the end of the day, we are also human beings, and so it's hard to keep that facade for too long. But we keep advocating as much as possible. I'll be flying to DC next week in order to make sure the administration, the incredible Trump administration, keep doing the great work they've been doing to secure the release of all the hostages. And we keep advocating here in Israel. I was in the Knesset earlier this week, speaking to our elected officials, emphasizing why we need to prioritize the sanctification of life, unlike our enemies who simply sanctify death.
Yeah, exactly right. We're just watching live pictures here, by the way, of what looks like another car with hostages inside being driven through by the Red Cross from one side, from Gaza into Israel. It's always a pretty horrible scene as well, isn't it, the way that this kind of happens, the way that they surround the car with these armed militia men from Hamas, a terrorist organisation, you know, deliberately trying to intimidating the women and the people inside the cars.
Yes, I think it's part of Hamas psychological warfare, to be honest. I personally don't think we should show those footage, at least not in Israel, because they aim in make us unbalanced, to rattle us, and we don't need to play to their hands and to their wishes. At the end of the day, they try and present that they're still a force to be reckoned with. But if you look on the sentiments in Gaza, it appears like they lost a lot of their support, and they're only on uniform when they do these ridiculous ceremonies. But on the battlefield, they hide behind their own civilians, hide in their own hospitals, schools, etc. And so we should not give too much credibility to any show of force they try to present.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much, Moshe, for talking to us, and we can wish you luck and Godspeed with all of the things that you're trying to do, and hopefully your brother-in-law, Omri Myron, will be back soon. Thank you very much for talking to us. It's coming up to 9:58. Julie Hartley-Brewer is here. Very good morning to you.
Very good morning. Yeah, really, really good to see those hostages coming out. I mean, drips and drabs, but I can't imagine what those families are going through.
It's just awful, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You can't imagine.
Yeah, lots going on today. That passenger jet crash in Washington, absolutely horrific. I mean, it doesn't look like there are going to be any survivors at all. Of course, I mean, you know, we're lucky to even get any planes in the air. Not to be glib, but fascinating. Michael O'Leary's attack on Rachel Reeves, calling out. Rachel Reeves hasn't got a clue. This is not. I've said on the air yesterday, Heathrow's not going to get a third runway before I retire, or frankly, I'm in a coffin.
Right. Exactly. And also, to be honest, it doesn't really need one. I mean, I said, can you imagine?
I think it does.
Well, no, but there's plenty of other places you could do it, though. Can you imagine what it will be like at Heathrow when they start trying to dig it up?
I kind of want to go back to that whole Boris Island. Remember the Boris Island?
Yeah, Boris Island's a good idea. We've got RAF
in
Manston down in Kent, which is a massive, great runway, which they could use for all the trade.